All right, hello. Welcome everybody. We are back for round 5 of the National Open. Joe Bruin will be fighting on our behalf and his own, obviously. I guess that's kind of more his own, but that's how tournaments work. But he is going to be here playing with the white pieces against a also quite strong opponent, Zhou. I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, but hopefully I can be forgiven. I believe it's Zhou Wang, something along these lines. A very similarly rated opponent. Both USCF and FIDE, I think, are both going to be quite close to each other, so this should be a very even matchup. Joe is coming into this round with a 1.5 out of 4 score. Not bad, obviously not ideal, but certainly not a disaster of a tournament or anything. Lost the first round, won the second, lost the third, which I was here for. So if he loses again today, then you can confirm that it's my fault. This was a jinx. And this morning I saw he had a very promising position. Came very close to winning a very nice game, but unfortunately the opponent defended very well, and so we were only able to come into tonight's night game with a draw. Not so bad, of course. Nothing wrong with a good draw. And that's going to give us an opportunity to kind of define the rest of the tournament. We're now at the tail end of the tournament, which feels weird, even though it's only day 3. But in a short tournament, only 7 rounds. We're on round 5 already. This is very close to the end. And so this game can decide a lot. This game can sort of determine, was this a good tournament? Was this a bad tournament? Was this average? So far, seems pretty normal. We've had good results playing down and poor results playing up. But now we're at a much more even matchup, and so this is going to define kind of, we know it's not going to be a massive success. We know it's not going to be a massive failure. Is it going to be slight success or slight failure in terms of the rating? But we see both players at the board, so we should get started any minute now, hopefully. Typically, these events do start 3 games a little bit late, so I am expecting a little bit of a delay, but everybody is seated, which is good. That's an improvement over round 3, where we did have to wait for the opponent for a few minutes. So at least today we can confirm we do have an opponent from minute 1 of this game. We're not going to have to worry about what happens if the opponent doesn't make an appearance. I'm going to consider that an absolute win. In the meantime, how's everyone doing today? Who was here for round 4? I saw it was a very interesting game. Especially a lot of the middle game got really interesting. Some of the end game, I guess, okay, there were some mutual mistakes, but the middle game was very deep strategically. A lot of interesting stuff to talk about there. Maybe we'll see some of the same themes in today's game. I really wouldn't be surprised. Let's go, Joe. True. And there he is, the man himself. He's seated, he's ready. He's adjusting his pieces. This is a very important part of the game. For all of you who might not have played like a lot of over-the-board tournaments, it's important to set the tone early. You have to position your pieces correctly at the beginning of the game to intimidate your opponent. And it's very precise. You have to do it for like just long enough that they know you're like very serious, because you have to be a very serious guy to like really care about how your pieces are positioned. But you can't do it for too long, or then they start to get suspicious. They're like, I don't know. Surely it can't take him this long. Joe gives the camera a quick stare. He's ready. Look at this man. Top 5 most locked in players of all time. The other 4 were Joe in the first 4 rounds. And now here we are. We gotta zoom in, actually. So this is... Oh, no, never mind. Here we go. Hands have been shook. The game is underway. And I'm going to be a little bit behind the board, so maybe I'm going to have to jump back in time slightly until the board catches up. But we do have what looks like a Sicilian, and then an Alapin. Very interesting. So this is another this is going to be a constant problem for me. I'm not sure if this is Joe's normal repertoire or if he chose it specifically for this game. Both are possible. But in any case, his selection was the Alapin once it appears on the board. We can talk a little bit more about the opening. But the opponent has gone for a very unusual response and is now already thinking. So honestly, off to a good start. Can't really complain. So we'll catch up slowly this way. This is my plan. Okay, here we go. The board is starting to catch up now. So we have e4 on the board. Joe, this I know Joe plays. e4 is his weapon of choice. The Alapin Sicilian, so he's gone for the move c2, c3. Typically, against a Sicilian, you would see the knight coming out very early is much more common, trying to activate the pieces very quickly and contest the center with pieces rather than pawns. c3 is a much slower attempt, but the idea is that white is still preparing this central advance. We've gotten one pawn into the center, we want to get our second one. And if we manage to do it with this pawn supporting it, then the center is a lot more stable. We're not going to have to take back with a piece and leave the center a little bit undefended. Downsides, it is slow. We're not developing a piece, which already by move 2 is quite significant. We spent half our moves, in a way, not developing. And secondly, this knight would generally like to go to c3. Both knights generally prefer to be advanced forward towards the center, so the fact that this square is occupied is a little bit of a negative. And this gives black some time to set up multiple different constructions that are generally considered quite fine for black. Most commonly, black will either take the opportunity to strike in the center himself with d5, even though this brings the queen out. The fact that this pawn occupies the square that the knight would like to go to means that this queen is actually kind of safe where it is. It's one of the rare examples where bringing your queen out early in chess is kind of fine. The second is to challenge this pawn immediately, once again taking advantage of the fact that the knight can't come out and defend it naturally, and putting the question to this pawn of, okay, is something going to defend you? Are you going to move forward and weaken your center even more? That's now 2 of the 3 moves that you spent in the opening not developing a piece, and once the knight moves, it's likely going to be 4. We've made 4 pawn moves with our first 4, which is generally going to mean that we're quite a bit behind in development. But there are other options too, and in this game our opponent went for the rather unusual move e6, which is aimed similarly to white at advancing the b pawn forward and trying to contest the center. Joe, of course, goes for d4, continuing the plan. Another unusual move from black, capturing immediately. And now, after the recapture, it does go for d5. Joe goes for e5, and we have more or less caught up with the board. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we have now is kind of a transposition to a French defense, in a way. This position could also be reached by a different move order. If Joe started with e4 and the opponent responded with the French defense, then after d4, d5, should be very normal. Both sides are contesting the center. e5, c5, trying to undermine the pawn. White defends it. Now black could have taken. Generally not a very good move, but could be done. White takes, and then we would have the same position as in the game. So even though the game began as a Sicilian, we are now into a very French defense kind of character. Thank you, Dola, for the raid, and hello to Speed Chess. Is bishop d3 a blunder to defend the e-pawn? So bishop d3, I assume you mean in this position, after knight f6. Bishop d3 is okay. It's a little odd-looking move. I generally wouldn't recommend... I wouldn't recommend it in like a general position, because we are now blocking the d-pawn, which we've already invested time to trying to get into the center. That means this bishop is going to have to move again to get out of the way so the pawn can go forward. And also, these pieces are a little bit discombobulated immediately, so black has the opportunity to play, for example, d5 himself, try to exploit the fact that this bishop is undefended. The bishop has also abandoned the defense of this pawn, so there's a very annoying fork if white decides to actually take this pawn, which means it does get kind of awkward immediately. But it does have some upsides. Coming back here, since we've moved this pawn forward, we now have a natural square to bring the bishop back to, and this bishop will be very well placed on this diagonal if it manages to comfortably get here. So it's not a terrible idea. In this position, I probably wouldn't play it directly, but it is an idea that you would see sometimes, for example, with the inclusion of the moves knight f3 and d6. Then after c3, knight f6, bishop d3 is a very serious line, since now black doesn't really have the option of playing d5 again without wasting a full move, doing in 2 moves what he could do in 1. So the idea is fine, and it doesn't immediately lose or anything. But Joe instead goes for, the opponent doesn't make us make that decision, which is nice, and instead we get this sort of French structure. Joe goes for an interesting move, bishop to e3. A little unusual against the French. I would generally expect a move like knight to c3 or knight to f3, developing the knights first. But Joe goes for bishop to e3, which is also perfectly fine. The opponent gives the check on b4 with the bishop, and Joe blocks with his knight. Now the opponent is once again thinking. So far, Joe has definitely gotten pretty much everything he wants out of the opening. We have a French defense type structure where generally in the French, black tries to put a lot of pressure on this pawn. This pawn is very often like the cornerstone of white's position. It defends this pawn, which means that this pawn is going to be a very important thorn in black's side for a very long time. It also means that white has a big space advantage, especially on the king side, where he can eventually develop an attack. So black generally needs to try to contest this pawn because he can't really contest this pawn. But since he's traded very early, all of that pressure has kind of been released, and now white is very, very comfortably defending this pawn. This bishop is ready to defend it, the queen is ready to defend it, this knight can come out and be ready to defend it. And so black's counterplay is going to be pretty minimal for a while, or at least not in the standard French counterplay way. Secondly, this bishop is kind of misplaced here. The fact that we brought this out to make a check looks tempting in this position for the opponent. It looks like you're forcing white to do something, which is true. You are forcing some kind of response. But the problem is the response that white is forced to play, we're developing the knight even to this square, but the square is certainly better, and one of the reasons that we shouldn't take on d4 early as the opponent, so as not to give white this square. This is a move that white was going to play anyway, so we haven't really gained any time by making this check. Maybe we've made white make this move like a move or two earlier than he was otherwise going to, but the knight was going to be here eventually, and we would much rather this bishop is somewhere back on like e7, for example, where it can try to support counterplay with the f-pawn. Now what the opponent is going to have to deal with, and why he's already thinking this early in the game, is how to develop the rest of the pieces. This bishop is the classic French problem. It's staring at a massive wall of pawns right now, and it's going to have a very, very hard time getting out. This knight also doesn't really have a great home. Typically, black would try to bring it around to this square where it would put pressure on this pawn. But since there's very little pressure on this pawn, now this knight is actually not so great here anymore. It's not stable. We talked yesterday about the concept of an outpost and how this knight would be very great here. Like, if this pawn was already here, if we made some, like, I don't know, completely random moves, like this for some reason, then the knight would be beautifully placed here. It can never be contested by either of these pawns, and so it's going to be here basically forever. It does put at least some pressure on this pawn, even though there's not going to be a ton, and black would be very, very comfortable. More importantly, the knight being here also kind of blunts any kingside attack that white can make, because this knight is always going to be in the way. But without white making some very cooperative moves, eventually, once the knight reaches this square, it'll be annoying for a move or two, but it will eventually get chased away by the move g4. For example, if we immediately go for this idea, we try to bring the knight here. Zhou can advance his f-pawn, for example, to slide the bishop back to safety. And then after black does something like castles, what Zhou can already consider a move like g4, sending the knight back to where it came. Most likely, we're not going to do that. It's a little bit early to do those sorts of operations, but that is an option that's available. The opponent does develop the knight here. There's not really anywhere else it could go, so it does have to go there. Now it's Zhou's turn to think a little bit, but this should be a pretty easy move for Zhou. The most natural move in the position is what it looks like he's reached out and played. We'll see on the board in a second. Is he's just going to develop his light square bishop out to this very, very powerful diagonal, where it's also going to prevent this knight coming to around to the square we talked about over to f5. Force a Ruy Lopez-like structure onto a Sicilian. Yeah, there are a lot of types of transpositions like that can happen, especially if you don't play an early d4 and the opponent goes for e5 at some moment. The positions do take on that character very frequently. You'll see it in a lot of like Moscow Sicilians as well. You'll see some transpositions into Ruy Lopez type structures. But in this game, we see a secret third option where our Sicilian has actually become a French, which is really not really common, but it does happen. Okay, thank you for letting us know, Erold. I don't know what you're hoping us to do with that information, but I'm glad that we now have it. Anyway, bishop d3 is on the board, and now black needs to decide what he's going to do. The natural option would be to either castle the king, develop the bishop, or move the knight. Try to kind of develop this knight to the square where it's a little more safe. One of those three moves is probably going to be played here. I can't really imagine much else that black can do. It looks like we do have a move on the board. We have the move bishop to d7. Looks like it's played. So black is just developing the bishop, which in a way develops the bishop, arguably. Another argument is this didn't really, like, the bishop isn't doing any more here than it was on c8, so this is a little bit of a waste of a move, but it will eventually need to go here. So black is saying, I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with the rest of my pieces, but I am quite sure what I want to do with this bishop, so let's get that out of the way now. Downside is it's quite slow, and it's going to have some concrete problems at some moment. For example, if we do manage to get rid of this bishop, which is possible, we could already kick this bishop around very, very far back. This square becomes very, very tempting to put a knight. We talked about outposts. If we could get a knight here, it would never be contestable. The e-pawn has already moved, the c-pawn is gone. And this knight is a beautiful thorn in black's side. So one option for Zhou, if he wants to go for this immediately, is he could go a3, just attack the bishop. Since this knight hasn't moved, which is very important, this is since if the bishop hadn't moved and black instead moved the knight to g6, black could have brought the bishop all the way back here and it would be kind of okay. But now black has to make a pretty unpleasant choice. Either black needs to give the bishop for the knight, which is a big advantage for white. Now white has two bishops, solidifies the center even more. This pawn will never come under any pressure. And more importantly, this is black's good bishop. Like, if black could trade this bishop for a knight, he'd be perfectly happy with that, even though white gets two bishops. But trading off the good bishop, and the good bishop meaning that it's not the one that's constrained by his own pawns, for a knight is a much bigger deal. So this would be quite bad. But going back might be even worse, because now, once the bishop gets chased away even further, this knight can jump in with pretty powerful effects to a very, very nice looking square. So that's one option that Joe could go for. Another option is to start expanding on the king side. He could go for a move like f4, trying to solidify the center and preparing eventually for f5. He could go for h4, starting to claim some space on the king side. He could go for knight to f3, coming to g5 and starting some attack. Several options. But he does go for knight f3, the most stable option. Just trying to keep things normal. No need to weaken your own pawn structure when you can just develop your pieces. And this move sets up, I think Joe has probably played this move partially because he realizes that he's setting up a very devious trap. Anyone know what trap I'm referring to? Any fellow devious tricksters in the chat? I've noticed that many French players play knight to g6 when white has a bishop there. Yeah, exactly. So this bishop is very, very powerful on this diagonal. It puts a lot of pressure on black's king side. And so a very common response to that is to try to block this bishop out with a knight, which is not ideal. You don't really want to block a bishop with a piece because that piece can eventually be kicked away. But black often just doesn't have any better option to do, and if white does make this exchange, we have sort of the same thing in reverse. White is trading off his very, very good bishop, the light square bishop, for a knight, and more than a knight that's not very well placed. And then black actually has a pretty pleasant choice of which way to take back. You mentioned f takes is often the choice to try to open up the f file once black castles. Taking with the h pawn is also like quite reasonable, keeping the h file open. So knight g6 is very likely the move that we're going to see here. But there is a chance that we see something else, which would be a huge disaster for black. Black might not sense the danger and go ahead and castle, which looks normal, trying to complete the development. But white has a very, very typical idea here that can just destroy the French like immediately if black is not careful, which is to sacrifice his bishop on h7. This is one of the reasons that knight g6 is often important. Now if black goes ahead and takes, which he pretty much has to, I mean, technically you can move the king, but then you just lost a pawn for nothing. Black is forced to take. The knight comes into g5. This is possibly why Joe put the knight on f3. And now if the king goes back to g8, trying to seek shelter, the queen comes in, and there is no good defense to checkmate on the king side. That means that the king has to come forward, but once again the queen swoops in, and bad things are going to happen to this king. Often, white can also attack the king from this diagonal, which is also very, very clean in this position. Black would have to defend with a knight, and then absolute worst case, white recovers his sacrificed piece, and now the king is out in Narnia. And then the final way that white can continue the attack is to move h4, trying to bring another pawn into the fray, force this king to adventure even further, and eventually white is going to deliver checkmate. So we could see a very quick win. That would be nice. Instead, the opponent goes for the move rook to c8, which I guess was the point of moving this bishop out. Black wants to develop his rook to the c-file, try to keep at least the illusion of some pressure on this knight, but it doesn't really do very much, I wouldn't say, yet. This knight would have to move out of the way first. Joe has gone ahead and castled, and now black really needs to make a decision. You know, black has kind of stalled the decision of what to do with the king as much as he can now by making moves on the queen side, but now moves on the queen side don't really make a lot of sense. So he kind of has to pick a plan now, like a real plan. And again, he could castle here and he would run into the same problem here, which would give Joe a very easy day at the office. But I don't think that will happen. It's too typical an idea for someone to blunder on move 10, usually. Okay, looks like he's reaching out. He's played the move knight to a5. So I was wrong. He found he's found another move on the other side of the board to try to delay things. And now he is opening up sort of a threat on this knight. There isn't... It is technically attacked. This is not that big a deal necessarily. Like, Joe probably would be willing to sacrifice this pawn if he needed to. But in this particular case, I don't really think he needs to. Seems like just not a necessary thing to do. Instead, he has a number of options. One is to move this knight, for which, again, there are multiple options. He could bring the knight to b5, aiming for the square, which would be the most forcing move, but probably lets black off the hook quite a bit. If nothing else, black could even just take, and then at least black has gotten rid of his very, very bad bishop. Or Joe could also move the knight back, preparing to reroute it to the king side. Either for g3 and h5, maybe to f4 and h5, both are possible. They're probably very much the same. And black's queenside play here, even though black has this open file to himself, there are no entry squares on the file. Every square is covered very cleanly. So there is not really... it's not really a big advantage for black that he does control the c file. The only thing that he could do to try to exploit it would be to bring the knight forward again, attacking this bishop. But the bishop can very comfortably come back, defend this pawn, and then once again there is just no entry on the queen side for black. White has a completely free hand on the king side. Second option, Joe might decide he wants to keep the knight where it is. Would be a little bit of an odd decision because the knight right now is staring at kind of nothing. It doesn't really need to be here. We would much rather have it over on the king side. But if he wants to preserve the knight here, he could also just play a very, very simple move like rook to c1. Wouldn't be terrible. He could play a move like maybe bishop to d2, technically. And then third option, he could actually just sacrifice his knight, say, yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm going to get a bishop for a knight out of it. Your dark squares are going to be very, very, very weak. I'm just going to continue my plan, maybe play a move like knight to g5 here, h4 here, start to expand on the king side, and kind of ignore whatever's going on over here. But this is an important moment. Joe's going to probably spend some time here trying to decide what it is that he wants to do, and I think the main thing that he's going to be considering is whether black's queenside play is important enough to make concessions for, or if he can safely ignore it. In this case, I'm pretty sure he can safely ignore it, but he's going to have to make that decision for himself. Because it is very easy to sort of hand wave, oh, like, yeah, I mean, black's queenside play doesn't do anything, probably. I don't see an obvious way, but if you miss a way that black can actually, like, generate some real play on the queen side, you will regret it. The French is an opening that it takes a while to get going, but if it does get going, you can just get steamrolled with the white pieces. So Joe will invest some time here. He does have a little bit of a time advantage, so he's not going to be too upset. And we are, unlike round 3, we are definitely not in a situation where time is likely to be a big factor in this game. I think the position is very simple for both sides. I think both sides understand very clearly what their plans are. And it's just going to be a matter of execution. But I would definitely expect this move. I think the best move, and the move that I'm hoping Joe plays, is this move knight to e2. The reason, I guess, the only reason that white might not play knight e2, I'm sure Joe sees knight e2. He knows that it's a good move, in principle. But Joe might be very enamored with this idea of sacrificing the piece when black castles, and he might want to keep that option open. So, you know, if white does go 92 here, it's a very powerful rerouting of the knight. Very, very strong. But now if black castles... well, actually, honestly, maybe you can still take here. Okay, apparently not. Well, apparently kind of. It's actually still quite good for white. But it's not as obvious as it was in the other lines, because now the queen is not as easily joining the attack on the king's side. It's blocked in by this knight. And so Joe might be thinking, like, yes, I'd like to play 92, but I also want to prevent black castling for the moment. And if I play 92, black is going to be allowed to castle. Next question, I guess, we see the bar shoot up, so there must be a reason that black actually can't do this, which would be quite important. Which I guess is actually... Oh. I guess there's a second idea now I look at the position. 92 actually threatens to trap the bishop. Oops, bar disappeared. And so in this position, white can actually just go ahead and play a30, and this bishop has no squares to go to since this knight is stuck. That means that 92 would more or less force knight to c4, just to give this bishop a home. I guess black could also try knight g6 instead to give it a home this way. But most likely we would see knight to c4, sort of a fork. White would slide back with the bishop, and maybe then black would castle. Apparently also losing. And this is where Joe might be wanting to have the option of bishop h7 still available, and he's concerned about giving it away. So why is white winning here? I don't think bishop h7 should be winning. Well, I mean, it is winning, but I don't think it should be like as clearly winning as the bar is suggesting. White is winning here because... Not 100% sure. I mean, the computer might just think this position is so dominant that, like, a normal move like knight f4 wins. Which I guess it does, but also not as high as the bar is suggesting. So let's try to figure out, like, what the computer is suggesting there is a knockout. It is saying the game is over if white finds the correct continuation in this position. And if white does not find the correct continuation in this position, he's probably still winning, but it's not quite a knockout. Let's see if we can puzzle this one out. There's a very vicious kingside attack coming, which is why white is generally better. This bishop is stranded. It has given itself a square. Well, actually, okay, maybe that's the solution. We can harass this bishop again. It has to come back. And then we can kick this knight away. Again, this knight is not on an outpost. It's vulnerable to attack. There's only one square for it to go to because the bishop has taken away its home. And once it comes back, now the bishop is trapped once again. So even knight c4 actually is not... This is also not saving the bishop. Black needs to move this knight to give this bishop a home. Either with knight c4 or without knight c4. Maybe here it's also quite good. But this is what Joe is calculating, most likely. Joe is trying to work out... can I trap this bishop? Can I give mate on the king's side? What's the most precise way to try to do both? Is the hard thing. Because Joe knows that both ideas are very, very powerful, and just trying to work out, like, how do I keep them both alive at the same time? Which is a very, very difficult thing in chess. It's very easy to play for, like, one idea. It's very difficult to balance multiple at once. Yeah, maybe there was even a queen b3 idea also, if the knight came to c4. Probably a lot of choices for white. And now we have kind of the opposite situation to what I was talking about in game 3. In game 3, I was talking about, it's really, really hard in chess to decide between a bunch of moves when they're all bad. Because generally in chess, you just kind of evaluate, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. And here, a lot of moves are good for Zhou. So he's having difficulty deciding which one is the most good. He does go ahead and play rook c1. We see the bar dip a bit, because this is just less forcing than knight e2 would have been. But it's not a bad move at all. Zhou just simply defends his knight, contests the c-file, and is going to play a slower game. Basically will prepare himself to launch the kingside assault later. And then once again, for the third time, black still cannot castle because of this sacrificial idea. I suspect this is probably why Zhou played rook c1. He wants to preserve the idea of sacrificing, and I guess probably overlooked that castling would have been impossible anyway because of these piece trap ideas on the queen side, which are not that easy to see. Once somebody mentions that there's an idea like that, you see it instantly. But until somebody mentions it, you don't really think to look at the queen side in general when you're on the white side of a French. Like, generally, your focus is the king side, your opponent's focus is the queen side, and it's very easy to just kind of mentally file whatever's happening on the queen side is like, I don't know, not my area. So now the opponent has to find a move. The opponent's strategy this whole game has been basically to ignore the king side and focus his attention on getting the queen side sorted first. Now that rook c1 is on the board, I don't really expect him to change that strategy. Obviously, we know castling is just losing on the spot, but a move like developing the knight even further would generally make sense, but I don't think he's going to do that. I expect the opponent will most likely advance with the knight further into the queen side, and then Zhou will have to make a decision of how to both defend this bishop and this pawn, which is not that easy a task since the rook is now occupying the square for the bishop that it would like to go to. And so the most likely line that I think we'll end up seeing is the move knight to c4. Again, this is kind of a fork. Normally, white would like to drop this bishop back, but there's a rook in the way. So the only good way, I think, to defend both of these is to move queen to e2. Black now has the option to take this bishop, and he might even do that. Because now black is... Generally, when you have the option of trading a knight for a bishop, it's something that you need to at least consider. But white is not going to be too upset in this at this particular trade, because the dark square bishop is not a very good piece. It's not a terrible piece. It's not the worst bishop of all time, but it's also not a great piece. Right now, it's staring into a lot of pawns on the dark squares. It can go up here and like try to aid in an attack, which is why white might want to preserve this bishop, even though right now it's not very good. But seeing a very, very active knight traded off for a very, very passive bishop, yes, it's a knight for a bishop. That is a bit of a win for black. But black has spent 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to make this exchange happen, and in the meantime, the rest of his position has suffered tremendously for it. So white would take back, most likely with the queen. You could even consider taking back with the pawn. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but it is a possibility. Just trying to open up the f-file. Taking with the queen, a little bit more stable. Also opens up routes for the queen to get over to the side of the board and join in the attack. But both are possible. I think it's just kind of a matter of taste. And then black would be able to prepare castling, probably by a move like knight to g6. Maybe can get away with castling immediately now. That would be a very deep calculation that has to occur. Without the dark square bishop, there's less possibility for the sacrifice to win on the spot. And the game would continue. White would have a reasonable advantage. Black could also say, okay, I can't trade the knight for the bishop, but I'm not going to do that because this is not a very good bishop, first of all. And second of all, I probably will always have this option. I don't think you're going to move the bishop away, very likely. So instead, I'm going to continue, you know, developing the queen side, try to put pressure on this queen side pawn, maybe bring the knight over to c6 is also a possibility, try to join the queen side even more. Another option could be to take this knight, which would look a little bit odd in general, but in this case, in conjunction with taking this bishop, Black is managing to trade a lot of the pieces off the board, which is going to be a big help for him since he's lacking a lot of space. So Black would have a lot of options to decide from in this position, and I think that is almost certainly what we're going to see. I'm actually very surprised that Black is spending quite a lot of time in this position, the current position on the board, because to me, knight c4 looks like the culmination of the strategy of his last few moves. Like, everything that he's done for the last 4 or 5 moves has been organized around getting this knight to c4 safely. And so now that he has the opportunity to, like, achieve his dream, he's hesitating to push the button. Which is interesting. That means he might see something that we don't. It might mean that he's realizing now that, yes, I can accomplish this, but it doesn't do that much. Like, I was hoping this would do a lot more for me. Or it could mean that he has just some utter idea that he's become enamored with and wants to do some other. Yeah, that would be the main reason to take with the f-pawn. It does have some advantages. Like, on the one hand, we open up the f-file, which means that this pawn becomes very, very weak and can be the launching point for an attack if we throw all of our pieces at it. Secondly, we've defended this pawn. This pawn is now not the base of the pawn chain. This one is, and this one is completely unreachable for Black. So this center mass will be here forever. It will never die. Black will never get any pressure here. And then eventually we can consider a move like e4, trying to break down Black's center as well. It's going to come at a heavy cost because Black will get a very beautiful outpost for one of his pieces. But it might be, like, one outpost is only one outpost. It might be insufficient. So there are a lot of positives. The downside is we are ruining our pawn structure quite heavily. We're going to be worse in, like, any kind of endgame if pieces do get traded off. And we're not going to be able to push the f-pawn down the board, which is one of the strategies that we would normally employ. For example, if we take with the queen and Black castles, a move we could consider could be something like knight h4, starting to prepare the advance of the f-pawn down the board and trying to undermine Black's pawn structure that way. So this would be a very, very difficult choice. I wouldn't be surprised if we get this position on the board, and then Joe thinks for like 20 minutes. I think that would be quite reasonable. Because there are, like, a lot of strategic nuances to work out here. And one of the big things that Joe is going to need to figure out is if Black is ever going to be able to play f6 and undermine the center from the front. Which is something that's going to require a lot of, like, very correct calculation on both sides. For example, if Black does it now, it would probably be very, very bad because White could play a move like knight to e5, sacrificing the knight just to get this queen into the attack and be able to chase this king around. These are the sorts of things that White's going to need to be ready to do. And it's also very typical in the French that, like, at any moment as White, you need to be willing to sacrifice a piece. And you need to be, like, ready, because that opportunity might only come once. But for now, we might not have to make that decision at all. Because there is a chance that Black plays some completely random move here, and then we get a second opportunity to evacuate the knight from the c-file. It's possible that Black plays a move like castles and loses on the spot. Also very typical in the French that you can't just lose on the spot. So step one of this whole thing, black needs to play knight c4 first. And honestly, looking at this position, I would say like black might like have to play knight c4. I'm not even sure that he has like a reasonable alternative. But he is giving us some thought. Go back to the video for now. The other move he could consider is making the exchange on c3. That could be what he's considering. Like, another way for black to play the position could be take this knight, allow white to take back, and then put the knight on c4. And say that this knight, I'm not going to trade it for this bishop, I'm just going to leave it here. It's going to be very, very powerfully placed. White plays a move like queen to e2, then maybe I can finally activate this bishop, make it a useful piece. Maybe I can bring the queen over to the queen side, try to put pressure on these pawns. Maybe I can even start like some kind of pawn storm of my own, try to break down the structure that way. That would also be a way to play this position. I wouldn't like it as black, because I really wouldn't want to give up the dark square bishop unprovoked. But that is maybe worth thinking about. Maybe that's what he is considering. But it's all moot now. It looks like we do see a move on the board, and it is knight to c4. Attacking the bishop, attacking the pawn. This makes it a very easy move for Joe. You just have to play queen e2. I don't think there's anything else to consider. This move is pretty automatic. So I expect any minute now we should see Joe slide the queen forward, defend the bishop, defend the pawn, and put the question back to black of, are you going to trade pieces? Are you going to keep pieces on? Are you going to castle and lose the game? What's your idea here? But he is thinking, so maybe he sees another option. There is a I suppose, like, if we're gonna... the fact that Joe is thinking means that we should at least look for some alternative. Alternative that he might be looking at, which is bad, but he might consider, is the move rook to c2. Trying to preempt the idea of black taking. Take back with the pawn, and now the f-file is opened. This move, this rook, that looks a little bit weird that we slid it up for nothing, is ready to slide over here and put even more pressure on the f-file. Even this wouldn't be like great for white, but that is something that he could be considering. The problem with this move is that if black goes ahead and takes this knight, we don't have a good way to recapture. Because if we take with the pawn, this rook has walked itself into a very unfortunate skewer. And if we take with the rook, then we have abandoned the defense of the b2 pawn, which is also coming with a fork. So we are just losing. We are losing the full pawn for absolutely no compensation, and allowing our good bishop to be exchanged off in the process. So hopefully he's not considering that, or at least not considering it too much. And fortunately, yes, he has played the move queen to e2, is on the board, and now it's black's turn to decide how to follow up. We are now probably at the point where black cannot make a random queenside move and like expect it to accomplish anything. He might still do it. Like, he's probably allowed to play a move like just, I don't know, a6 and not immediately lose on the spot. But that's not something like every other move you can at least argue there was some reasoning behind. Bishop d7, rook to c8, knight to a5, knight to c4 all had some logic. Even if they weren't the best, we are kind of out of queenside moves from black that I would say make a lot of logical sense. Only thing he might consider is like queen a5. Maybe try to bring this queen out and pretend that there's some pressure on the queen side. But the opponent's going to give this moment some thought, which makes sense. It's very typical in chess. You come up with like a short plan, maybe a 4 or 5 move long plan, and you just trust that the outcome of that plan is good. In this case, it was for black. It was getting the knight to c4. He's not calculating every possible response to the idea of getting the knight to c4. Right? That's just overwhelming. There's too much to calculate. And so you just trust that, okay, if I get the knight to c4, like, good things will happen. Let me make sure, like, the calculation that I'm going to do is going to focus on getting the knight to c4. And now he's accomplished the thing. Now he has to come up with a new, like, 4 to 5 move plan. And that's gonna take him some time. Especially since he's probably realizing at this point that, okay, my knight's on c4, but, like, whatever. White is not really that concerned that there's a knight on c4. So what can I do to, first of all, just find a plan in general, but second of all, how can I find a plan that justifies the fact that my knight has taken so much time and such a long adventure to make it to this fabled c4 square? For that reason, I think he's actually not very likely to take this bishop. It just kind of feels bad if you invest 4 moves to get the knight here, and then you immediately trade it off for a piece that's not even good. So I expect him to try to find something else to do, but at the same time, I don't know what else he's going to do. It's kind of hard to suggest a productive move otherwise. I suppose like queen a5 might be my prediction, but I don't think it's a very good move, so I hope my prediction's correct. Is castling kingside losing for black? Yeah, so we've looked at this a few times now in a couple different positions, but castling kingside does allow this very, very typical sacrifice. If black castles kingside, we get to sacrifice our bishop to draw out the king. After takes, knight to g5, the king can't go back because the queen will swoop in, and there is no good way to defend this checkmate. No piece can defend it. This bishop is stuck over here. This knight can't get over there. Nothing is helping. And if black instead goes forward, white has a few ways to continue the attack. The typical one is to slide the queen over here. In this position, this is probably the most convincing. We're now threatening all sorts of discovered checks. For example, knight to e6, picking up the queen is a very, very devastating one. And so black is usually obligated to play the move f5 to try to attack the queen at least. And then white can just simply slide the queen back, renew the threat, and there's really no good way of stopping some material being lost. In this position, we can maybe even consider taking queen h4 sometimes is an idea. In this position, it would just allow rook h8. But queen g3 is probably the simplest. I assume the computer is finding a slightly better option because, you know, the bar goes marginally down by this, but there's more than one way to finish the game. So black can't castle. That's really the only thing he can't do. Everything else would keep the game just, like, fine. He's quite a bit worse, but it's not as bad as it could have been if Joe had found knight to e2. But every other move I would expect is like if black just plays a random move like queen b6, yeah, like the evaluation doesn't change that much. This move doesn't do anything, but it doesn't like lose either. Did he Greek gift? He did not yet, but he will if he's given the opportunity. Which we might see. Then he'll go h6. He might, yeah, he might just say, okay, I want a castle, but I can't. What's like the easiest, like the most direct way that I can force myself to be able to castle? And h6 would be one of those. Knight g6, I would think, would be a more productive version of the same thing, just trying to prevent this idea while also moving a piece to a slightly more useful square. But h6 could be played. Prevents something from coming to g5, gets out of the way of the sacrifice. That is definitely an option for black. Both these guys look... I feel bad about my posture now. Look at these guys. They're sitting so responsibly. And I'm here at my desk. And I'm sitting worse. They're at this, like, crappy table that's probably too short for both of them. I guess now I feel obligated to sit up. What a bad day for me. Want to adjust the glasses. Has to make sure he's seeing correctly. But that's a good sign. That means that he's probably going to think for more. Generally, when your opponent like does like any motion with like their body, he gives like the tilt of the head. Like the move is not coming super quickly, so we will build up a little bit of a time advantage. But again, I don't think time is going to be relevant this game, at least not for a long while. It's just not a position that requires like that much precise calculation. Unless we go into one of these lines where white sacrifices a piece, which also isn't really that precise calculation. It's not that hard to evaluate, so I wouldn't expect that it does occur. But other than that, like both sides just kind of are just playing out their plans, and we'll see whose is better. Pretty much. Yeah, look at the difference between. We have this, and then these two are living their best lives. Respect. It's also like a really awkward situation for Joe right now. Because he knows that black can play one of, like, any move. There's probably, like, 5 or 6 moves that are just, like, the same. You know, maybe we can name some, like... Queen b6, queen a5, h6, knight g6, a6 even. Like, they're kind of all the same in that they don't accomplish anything for black, but they don't lose. By virtue... Like, if you do nothing, your move can't lose. Or it can't make it worse. So Joe needs to like he wants to be responsible and say like, okay, I'm gonna calculate what my opponent can do, but also like my opponent can just do too many things. Like there's no way that I'm gonna calculate everything. So Joe's probably just saying like to himself, like, okay, if black does nothing, I'm gonna pick like some generic move and just like make it. Probably something like h4 would be my guess. And so now Joe is ready to say like, okay, whatever you play, I don't care what you play. I'm just playing h4. Unless, like, if you don't lose a game next move, I'm playing h4. And I'll worry about the differences about h4 versus what you play, like, much later. So now Joe's decided on his move. Which means he has nothing to think about. Like, there's nothing to calculate. Like, he's not going to go through every move that black can play and then look at h4 and then be like, okay, what am I going to do then? It's like too much of a waste of energy to try to appreciate the nuances now when you can just wait for your opponent to make a move and then play your move and see what happens. So Joe looks bored, which is fair. I think everyone's bored. Even the opponent's probably bored, and he's the one thinking. And so one of the very important things for Joe to do is just, like, not forget that he's playing a game of chess. Which I only say half-jokingly, because it is, like, very possible when, like, obviously you don't, like, literally forget, but you can, like, completely mentally take yourself out of the game in these sorts of situations where, like, nothing's happening, your opponent's burning time for God knows what reason. You know, maybe it's going to be another, like, 10, 20, 30 minutes before you actually have something to do with your life. It's very easy for your mind to just, like, completely wander. Start thinking about things that are, like, completely unrelated to chess. And then finally your opponent does make a move, and you're like, oh, like, yeah, I'm here. Like, what was I thinking about again? Who told me I was playing a chess game today? Okay, we do see a move. Okay, as predicted, the opponent does go for queen a5. A move that does not accomplish very much, but also doesn't really spoil anything. I expect Joe to very quickly play whatever it is that he's prepared for just like a generic black move. I would expect h4. That would probably be my first candidate. Just trying to expand on the king side while you have the opportunity. It's not like black is doing anything useful over here, so we have the time to just improve our position generically. And it also just puts the onus back on black because it says, okay, you've made a move. You know, like, congratulations. Like, you spent 20 minutes, you came up with a move, you played it. It does nothing. It has not changed the position in any way. So I'm just going to play my move very quickly, and then what are you going to do? Like, spend another 20 minutes and, like, come up with another move that doesn't change the position in any way? And then I'm going to play h5. And then what are you going to do? Like, spend another 20 minutes thinking about a move that doesn't change the position in any way? So from a practical perspective, moves like these very just generic improving moves like h4, h5, maybe they're not even the best. Like, maybe there's something more precise here, I don't know. But putting the ball back into your opponent's court when they've already spent, like, so much time on a nothing move is very, very valuable a lot of the time from a practical perspective. So I do expect Joe to make a quick decision. Because I mean, I'm sure he anticipated that. I don't know if he anticipated specifically that queen a5 was coming. Because, you know, a lot of different moves could have been coming. But he definitely anticipated that, like, there was going to be some move that just doesn't really change the character of the position. So he'll just play whatever it is that he decided he wanted to pretty quickly. Which might be h4, it might be a3, it might be king h1, knight h4, like, just any kind of generic improving move. But he is thinking here. Which is fair. I mean, you do want to expend a little bit of time because queen a5 does, like, introduce some threats. It introduces, like, the possibility of trading the b pawns with starting with knight takes b2. It introduces the possibility of trying to take on c3 and hit the a2 pawn. So he is going to give it a few minutes just to, like, make sure that queen a5 truly is a nothing move, that it actually didn't change anything. Which I guess we should verify. It's not entirely guaranteed. So let's say white plays the move h4, which is probably the move that Joe wants to play. he's going to be worried about tactics beginning with knight takes b2. This is something that he's going to have to evaluate. Not really calculate, there's not much to calculate, but evaluate. So the idea is that black is briefly, temporarily sacrificing a piece, but undermining the support of this knight, so he'll get it back immediately. White will take back, black will take back probably with the rook, maybe with the bishop? Apparently with the bishop. I'm not sure what the massive difference is. White will recover his pawn by taking on b7, and now the exchange of these b-pawns significantly favors white compared to the previous position, because now there truly is no queenside play for black ever. Typically, black's queenside play would be aimed at targeting these pawns, but they're now being traded off. So white should be very, very happy that black's counterplay is gone, and secondly, this queen is now very, very active. It prevents black from castling completely because the king is needed to keep the bishop defended. And trying to free this configuration up is actually quite difficult, because this bishop can get very, very stranded. This knight is in trouble as well. This bishop is sometimes needed to defend the rook. It's actually quite difficult to even come up with like a particularly good move for black that doesn't immediately end up losing some material. And then because this queen is so powerfully positioned on the queen side, now suddenly White has always had his kingside play. He'll continue to have his kingside play, but he can also consider just like doubling on the c-file, starting to try to collect this pawn, which he'll very likely win, especially since black can't castle, and now this king is really, really starting to feel unsafe. So this whole operation doesn't really work out for black, this tactical sequence beginning with knight takes b2, but Zhou does need to verify that. He needs to be quite sure that that he isn't losing one of these pawns. Like it's not too much to calculate, but he does need to be a little bit worried that this queen will get trapped here. Just like in some vague world, like he has to be 100% sure that like if this bishop comes back to try to cut off the retreat of the queen, then there isn't like some miracle that this queen ends up getting trapped. And like as a chess player, like you know that it's not trapped, like you know pretty sure. But in a classical game, like, being pretty sure your queen's not trapped is not good enough. You have to be 100% sure that your queen's not trapped. So that's probably what Zhou's calculating right now. He's just making 100% certain that knight b2 is not a threat, and once he realizes that it's not, then he'll continue on with his h4 move, or something similar. But you can see he's locked back in now. And that's part of the mind wandering thing. Like your opponent makes a move and then you're like, oh, right. And then you spend like the first like 2 or 3 minutes of your calculation, not really calculating, but just like staring at the position and being like, that is a chess position. There are chess pieces in front of me. I know what those do. I know how the horsey move. Then you start being like, okay, but where did the horsey move? And I'm gonna figure that one out now. Haha. He's gonna give this. It looks like he's gonna give this like a pretty significant amount of time now, which I am a little bit worried about. Hasn't black reads on a2 in that sequence? In which sequence? In this position? Like after this sequence, if black goes ahead and takes this, black will not survive for some reason. Let me figure out exactly what reason. But there's a number of tempting moves here. The most direct is probably bishop to b5, which I expect will be the winning move. Putting a lot of pressure on the side square bishop and more or less forcing it to be traded off. And once this gets traded off, the king is like wildly unsafe. It has to move because if black blocks this check, this bishop will be lost with either piece. The knight, obviously, the bishop will fall because the rook is no longer defending it. But if the rook goes forward to defend it, it's still not keeping the bishop defended due to the pin. So the king is forced to move. And then, yeah, like, congratulations for black, you've won one pawn, but you're playing the rest of the game down a rook. And some very, like, even if there's no direct win, which there probably is, we can play a move like bishop g5 already looks really threatening, queen d7 looks very threatening. But even if none of those work, black is just, like, this rook will never enter the game. And so we can even do something like as simple as rook b1 is probably, like, more than good enough. See the bar drop a little, but we're still well into +2 territory, just bringing in the other rook. And more likely a move like queen d7, just preparing to put pressure on this knight. We're threatening to take this bishop and deliver a back-ranked mate is going to be just really, really hard for black to organize a defense around. Bishop d2 is also a threat, exploiting the fact that this is pinned. Black will get a little bit steamrolled. But it's a good point that this is something that, like, this is one of these things also that, like, you know is not going to work. I think both players know that black cannot take on a2 here, but you do need to, like, in a classical game, if this were a rapid game or a blitz game, you just assume that a2 is not takeable and, like, move on with your life. But in a classical game, you do need to check just in case there's, like, we're in the 10% of the time that it's illegal. What's the point of h4? It's just a generically improving move here. It doesn't do that much immediately. Like, it's not like, oh, h4, we're going to win the game. But we're just trying to get space on the king side. So this pawn is going to go basically as far as it can. If it gets all the way to h6, we're very, very happy. Because then black will be forced to weaken his king side with a move like g6 or taking, exposing all of the dark squares. For example, if we say like h4, h5, b5, h6, now this pawn has to make a decision. And it's a very, very uncomfortable decision of whether to go forward or take. And either way, let's say it goes forward, now the dark squares are just like a complete disaster for black. So generally, once this pawn does reach h5, black is forced to block it with h6. And now we have targets on the king side for ourselves. Eventually we can consider sacrificing. White might play a move like knight h2, trying to get a sacrifice ready. Mostly if black ends up castling king side, but even more generally. And then later in the endgame, this configuration is really, really good in various pawn endgames, because white will be able to make a passed pawn breaking through by advancing these pawns down the board. So this whole configuration, you see this in a lot of openings, but the French is a very common one. This configuration is a very a considerable advantage for white. As far as weakening white's king side, yes, like, it does come at a cost. We are weakening our king side. But in this position in particular, and in the French in general, the king side is white's territory. It is, like, all of white's pieces are pointing at the king side. All of black's pieces are not only pointing at the queen side, like, almost all of them are on the queen side. It's very, very unlikely that black is going to be the one that, like, manages to get stuff over here, right? It takes a lot of time and effort. So for this to be weakening, black would somehow need to be able to open the king side, not get mated himself, and then mate white, which is asking a lot, mostly. And then if we do get this configuration, the question becomes, okay, maybe this pawn is weak, how do we get to it? We can never put a knight here to attack it. We can never really move this pawn forward without killing ourselves, so we're not going to be able to, like, bring a bishop here and, like, put pressure on it. We're never going to be able to get a major piece here. So until some pretty late endgames, this pawn is going to be completely impervious and put a lot of pressure on black's king side. And then if we do make it to a very late endgame, even if this pawn becomes weak, it is also a very far advanced pawn. And so it can continue to be a strength even then. But does that mean that, like, h4 is some, like, genius winning move here? No. I mean, it's just... It's one of the ways to improve white's position. And I like it in this particular instance because black is not really doing anything in the meantime. So white has, like, kind of a free hand. And as long as white has a free hand, like, we might as well just improve our position as much as possible and then, like, figure out what to do. But that's also the reason I haven't even mentioned, like, The other thing that Joe is probably considering here is Joe can play the move a3 and guarantee himself the advantage of the two bishops, which in most circumstances, no brainer, you just do it. And so he's working out, you know, basically if too many things get traded off here, if this position is still very good for him or just, like, good for him. Like, I'm not going to be mad if he plays a3. That's also going to be very, very good for white. But we do need to calculate quite a bit here. Like, black can try to take with the knight, undermine the support of this knight. If white takes, black takes. Now black has won a pawn for quite a lot of compensation, but has won a pawn. If we play a move like bishop to d2, defending the knight can just come back, and now black is just kind of absconding with his extra pawn. So he does need to calculate this if this is what he wants to go for. But I just don't think there's a reason to. I mean, we can see the bar like does actually drop a little bit after h4, and it's happy at a3, so the computer does slightly prefer a3 now while we have the opportunity. But I don't think in practice it's necessary. I think in practice you just play like the normal move and let your opponent spend more and more time like trying to come up with a plan that they haven't shown you they're capable of coming up with yet. You call it the boat. I'm really, really bad with names. I don't really know most opening names. I don't know most names of like checkmates. I don't know most pawn structure names. So I'm going to be very, very bad at those. But the boat, for that one makes sense. It does look like a boat. But yeah, I also wouldn't take this as like free license to do h4 like whenever. h4 is... There are conditions that you need to make it work, and the conditions usually are like, that is your side of the board. Like, you're allowed to do these sorts of things on the side of the board that you control. Like, if we tried to do that on the queen side, like, if we played, like, a4 here, disaster. Really bad. Even if it doesn't lose a pawn immediately. Because it will eventually become weak. Because the queen side is not where... It's just not the side that we control. But when we have, like, very, very solid control over one side of the board, which, in this case, we do, then we're allowed to do stuff like that. We don't always want to do it because sometimes it gets in the way of our pieces. Like, maybe we'd want to put the queen on h5 sometimes, so we don't want the pawn in the way. But we're allowed to at least, like, consider it. It's also for that reason, like, even if we go back, like, many moves, like, this position you could already consider h4. It wouldn't be that stupid. So, like, here you okay, maybe not here, but here you could probably play h4. I probably actually would have played h4. Because these are moves that, at a certain point, it almost just becomes, like, a developing move. It's a move that you play not because there's, like, a reason to play it, specifically, but because you just, like, it's just the move that you make. It's just a developing move. Like, it's kind of the same as knight f3. Like, why is knight f3 a good move? It's a good move. we develop our piece, we put it on the right square. You can think of it as you're developing the h-pawn, if you want to. Maybe that's a good way to phrase it. Let's go, Gel. I agree. Joe's got a very nice position. All of this yapping aside, we can also just take a minute and appreciate what this man has created for us. He's off to a very, very good start. I guess we're not really up on the clock anymore, but we're a little bit up on the clock because we're white, so the time that we spent on this move, we're going to catch up a little bit when black makes his. So we're up a little bit on the clock. Position is objectively very good. It's practically much easier to play white in this position as well, so the evaluation is not fake. This is a sort of position, like +1 position, that like you can very easily demonstrate as +1 as white. And so Joe, I think, has very good chances to pull together a full point. But he's in the tank. This is a very long think now, which does worry me a bit. Because This shouldn't be a position where there's much to calculate. This is the type of position where it's much more based on understanding than it is on calculation. Generally in chess, you do like two things, and there's like two things you do when you think. First, you figure out what you want to do, and then you calculate, can I do it? And in different positions, those two are harder than each other. In this position, it's almost entirely, do you know what he wants to? Does Joe know what he wants to do? And once Joe knows what he wants to do, the calculation is quite straightforward. It's not that bad. It's not trivial, but it's not that bad. There are lots of positions where like you know exactly what you want to do, but calculating whether it's possible is very, very, very difficult. You'll see that in like a Najdorf, a King's Indian defense, like those sorts of things, where you have to be very, very precise every move, even though the move that you want to play like is very obvious. The question is just whether it loses on the spot or not. Here you have the opposite problem, where it seems like because it's just taken so long at this point, my guess is that it's not that he's miscalculating something or he's struggling with like some concrete line, it's that he just actually has no idea what move he wants to make. And so he's trying to substitute, sometimes in positions where you have no idea what move you want to make, in principle, you can substitute just calculating and just kind of brute forcing your way to the right answer, but this is a really hard position to do that, because again, there's very little to actually calculate. So I wouldn't be like shocked if we see like a really odd move here. Like Joe might play something that hasn't even occurred to us yet. I can't really guess what that would be for obvious reasons, but there's a chance we see like a completely off the wall move here. And then similarly for black, for the opponent, there's a chance that Joe makes his move, and then the opponent takes 20 minutes and plays like another move we haven't considered. It is that type of position where if you don't know about these ideas, if you don't know that h4 is generally good, if you don't know that you want to be playing on the king side, if you don't know that like exchanging these b pawns is generally going to be very, very favorable for white, if these are things that you just don't know going in, they are very hard to figure out over the board. So we could see, I guess if we try to predict, like, h4 is definitely still my leading candidate. I think that's a move that you just play if you don't know what else to do. a3, second most likely, because there's calculation to be done there. And this is not a position where you really want to be calculating if you don't have to. Third most likely, probably knight h4. I could see Joe playing knight h4, trying to prepare f4, f5. Might not even be that bad a move. And that's not a very good move. But I could see him. I could see this sort of thing being on his mind. He might play knight d2, I guess is also possible. Knight d2 wouldn't be such a bad move. Just try to get rid of this very powerful knight. It doesn't really advance white's game plan, but it does interfere with black, so it's at least doing something positive. And I don't think black can grab this pawn safely because knight b3 will put a lot of pressure on this knight. Black would have to defend, and then at the very least there's like knight b5 or something, and white is making very, very serious attack for the price of one not super relevant pawn. So that could be what Joe's thinking about as well. There's that possibility. But Joe is still in the blender. It's been a very, very long thing. We were wondering if knight b2 is a wild idea. Yeah, so we did look at knight b2 a bit. After h4, we can go back to the big board. So after a move like h4, or any move, h3, king h1, whatever. Black could try to grab this pawn in exchange for this pawn. So white is forced to take, black has to take, white is forced to take. And then this is why I say the calculation is not too hard, because there's this is where the calculation ends, right? There's not really additional moves that black can play that demand a precise response. This is just opposition that you have to figure out the evaluation of. And so the question is, okay, we've traded off these pawns, we traded off a pair of minor pieces. Who does that favor? Well, black now doesn't have any queenside play because the thing that he would play against in this b2 pawn is gone. Black's very powerful knight on c4 is gone. White's queen is very active. And black is completely incapable of castling because his queen will prevent it for quite a long time, like potentially forever. Black might not be able to castle at all this game, ever. Furthermore, this pawn becomes weak. Well, so white is now able to play on the queen side as well as the king side, where there's pressure on both sides of the board. And so very likely what happens is black is actually forced to trade into an endgame here that involves losing the a-pawn, and then just has to defend this very miserable position where white has a extra passed a-pawn that is just going to kind of win the game. That would probably be black's best case. And I think probably both players know that if they get this kind of position, that is going to be the outcome. What Joe is wondering, I think, is if that's good enough, basically. He knows that his position here is very good. This has to be good for white. Black has made many, many moves that don't really do anything in the position. White has developed quite normally. So white should have a very, very serious advantage. But what Joe's just not sure of is this winning, or is this just much better? And if he comes to the conclusion that he's just much better here, then he's probably willing to go for that line. But if he thinks that this position is already strategically winning, then he might be but I'm only going to be up one pawn in an endgame. Is that good enough? So I think that's where that's where you often see these really deep time expenses come in, is where your calculation's done. He's been done with his calculation for 20 minutes. Every line, there's no line here that's more than 3 moves deep, or 4 or 5 moves deep, maybe. So he hasn't seen anything new in the last 15-20 minutes. He's just trying to decide, is it good enough to win one pawn? Basically. Or do I need more out of this position? Do I deserve more out of this position, more or less? And that's really, really hard, because that's not that's not something you can solve, really. That's something that he just needs to have the intuition for. And he's trying to build that intuition by thinking about the position more and more, but it's going to be a very, very tough task to give a proper evaluation of this position over the board. Knight takes b2 after takes traps the bishop with a3. I'm not sure which line you mean. Are we talking about h4? So takes... Knight takes d5. Oh, you want to go knight takes d5 here. Oh, you want to go knight takes d5 immediately, you're saying, and then trap the bishop. That's interesting. That didn't occur to me even at all. That could be what Joe's calculating. So this is a very interesting idea. We can sacrifice a knight temporarily. We're putting pressure on this knight, so black has to recapture with the pawn. And then after a3, we are trapping this bishop. It already had nowhere to go, but now it also can't exchange itself off because we've gotten the knight out of the way. So black is going to have to give this bishop back for a pawn, which will restore material equality. And then the question is if that's positive for white. And wow, okay, good call. That appears to be what Joe has gone for. After a very, very deep think. Knight to d5. Okay, let's see that moment on video. Knight takes d5 is on the board. Wow, what a move. That is a fascinating concept. That is a crazy move. I don't know if it's good. The computer isn't, like, mad, but it isn't super impressed either. So it might not be objectively very good, but as a psychological blow, this is going to come as a shock to the opponent. There's like, the opponent probably, it's only been a minute, the opponent probably doesn't even understand, like, what's going on. Like, why am I being given a piece? Now he looks confused. I'd be confused. That's an insane move. That is not a common idea at all. I mean, huge props to Joe for even, like, considering such a move. Even if he had come in here and said that he had thought about it and not played it, I'd be impressed. To actually come up with it and then be willing to play it in a position where you know that you're very close to winning. That takes some stones. Wow. I'm like so shell shocked. I I haven't even, like, calculated anything. That's a crazy move. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, that's a huge development for the game. I mean, well, White has sacrificed a piece temporarily, but he has sacrificed a piece. There's zero chance the opponent saw this coming. His moves are forced, so, you know, it's actually quite easy for him to respond. But he's going to be, like, scared now. Like, very scared. Because he's going to think that, especially since Joe just spent, like, half an hour, he's going to be thinking that Joe has seen this, like, to the end. And so your immediate reaction, you can see him give the little glance to... he glances... That's very common. You do a tiny little glance at your opponent, and in this case, like, to try to tell what your opponent's thinking. Just like, does my opponent look like he knows what's going on? Does he look relaxed? In this case, he's looking at his opponent to be like, Am I screwed? Like, do I resign now? Are you sure? So for the opponent now, he's in a really tough position because I mean, first of all, he just needs to calm down and be like, oh, I might be losing right now. It's possible, but I need to, like, pay attention and, like, lock in because, yeah, maybe I'm losing, but maybe I'm not. I mean, this is a crazy move. Maybe my opponent just, like, overestimated something or got too excited. All right, let's start giving this sacrifice its due analysis. So in this position, Joe has gone for an insane move. Knight takes d5. Sacrificing the knight temporarily to undermine support of this knight and get out of the way of the bishop. Black needs to take with the pawn. Black can take with the knight if he thinks that the other position is really bad. Now White will take, and White has won a clean pawn. Black has a little bit of compensation because this knight is very powerful, but White is up a very, very clear pawn. 7 pawns to 6. No immediate pressure on, like, these pawns or anything. Very, very big success for White if this is what Black plays. So this is Black's, like, back pocket. He's going to calculate e takes d5 first and say, okay, if I don't see anything, if I think e takes d5 is, like, losing, then I'll take with the knight. And e takes d5 is on the board. He has now played it. So, which is forced. I mean, he doesn't really have a choice here. So Joe is going to play a3 very quickly. I think. I'm going to give him a second. I don't know what he's thinking about. Maybe he's going to hit us with, like, an even more crazy follow-up. But, I mean, we have to play. There you go. I'm gonna assume he plays a3. And the idea of the sacrifice is that before there was a knight on c3, so in response to a3, Black could have taken this knight, but now there's no knight there, so this bishop actually has 0 squares to go to. Everything is trapped. So this bishop is going to have to sacrifice itself for the pawn. And after takes, now this knight is under pressure. Sort of. I don't think white can really take it immediately, but it is under a little bit of pressure. Well, he's not going to do that. I was going to say, this pawn is now very, very powerful. It can start sacrificing itself at some stage to get pieces into the game, and try to blow up in the center, most importantly, where this king is trying to stay. And if this forces black to castle, to go over to the king side, now black is going to face a very, very serious attack at some stage over against this king now that it's had to commit over to the side of the board. Most likely, white would start with something like... white can already consider moves like knight to g5. White can consider moves like bishop to g5 is also very, very serious. Maybe something like bishop f4, just playing a little bit slower, getting out of the way of this knight. And now that the position is opening up a bit, with the inclusion of this pawn moving away, the position has very high potential to become open, and then these two bishops can become very, very powerful. Now, should be said, we do see the bar. We know that this isn't like fantastic for white or anything. White is still better, but we haven't won the game with this sacrifice or anything. This is just a transformation of the position that may or may not be positive. And in fact, the bar has gone a little bit down, so we know that it's objectively negative. But the practical value is that this is something that the opponent for sure did not anticipate, and for sure is not the type of position that the opponent was aiming for. So the character of the game has changed substantially, which means that both players, not just Joe, are going to have to kind of readjust their understanding of the position. This was going to be a very, very slow maneuvering, developing game. Now it's going to be there's very high chance that we see some kind of violence occur. All right, a3 is fortunately on the board. Now the opponent needs to decide. I said bishop a3, but the opponent needs to decide how best to give away the piece. One way is to grab this pawn, but black doesn't necessarily need to give away this piece now. Once white takes the bishop, it will be exchanged back, or the pawn will be recovered rather. So black could instead play kind of any move here. Maybe like bishop f5 comes to mind, trying to trade off the bad bishop. Castling comes to mind, trying to get some king safety. And then after white takes, for example, castles, takes. Now there's also some pressure here, for example. White will need to... Well, white doesn't need to be like fast, because if black has some time to consolidate his position, then he should not have any problems. A big downside for white of the fact that we forced this, the upside is we gained a lot of space in the center. The downside is we freed up this bishop. Now this bishop is not staring at a wall of pawns anymore. It can, for example, come here, try to trade itself off, come here, try to trade itself off, contest the attack on the king side, and this knight is still a very, very powerful piece. So if we do end up in a situation where both of these bishops leave the board, it could even be black who's better. So Joe's going to have to like demonstrate something concrete in the next few moves to justify this big transformation, as exciting as it is to see on the board. It's only step one. And that also explains why Joe is thinking so long, because he knows that this is not the end of the line. He knows that there's still a very, very big fight ahead, and so he needs to have follow-ups ready. Which I have to imagine he will. I would expect like pretty quick moves for the next few. And it's gonna have to be pretty quick moves for the next few. Because I said earlier, time is not gonna be a factor in this game. Throw that out the window. This is now exactly the type of position where time is very, very relevant. For the opponent, the opponent needs to... He's at a big disadvantage in terms of that time management. Because whereas Joe has already spent 20-30 minutes looking at this exact position, this is probably the first that the opponent's seeing of it. I cannot imagine that this was in his mind's eye at any stage of the game. And so with fresh eyes, Black is going to need to come up with some pretty precise moves of his own to try to hold the balance here. Because as fast as White needs to be, if that attack does come quickly, Black needs to avoid getting steamrolled. And also needs to balance the fact that even if he survives the attack, he can end up in just like some endgame situation where there's a very weak isolated pawn here, White has 2 bishops. In a very long-term endgame, White is going to have a permanent advantage. A small advantage, but a permanent small advantage heading into any deep endgame. And so Black is going to need to balance the fact that he would like to get pieces off the board so he doesn't get mated, but also not get all the pieces off the board so he doesn't get ground down in some kind of endgame. And that's a really difficult tightrope to walk a lot of the time. A very complex position. Very interesting fight ahead. I would not be surprised if we see another very, very deep think here. This could easily be a... Well, never mind. We have a move on the board. We have knight f5 on the board. Wow, that is... That is an insane move. And not in a good way. Well, in a good way for us, but... That very likely loses on the spot? So Black has played the... Okay, knight to f5, it's very natural. Black is trying to put pressure on this bishop, trying to interfere with this diagonal, and also does open up a home for this bishop to come back if White doesn't take it immediately. But at the same time, it moves this knight off of the e-file, which means that this king is very, very exposed. And so White has, if I'm correct, and I'm not usually correct, so, you know, bear with me, but in this case we can cheat and see that I'm at least a little correct. If I'm correct, White has a very big opportunity to end the game here. Take advantage of this massive weakness on the e-file and begin a really nice tactical sequence, beginning with the move e6. Remember I said earlier that this pawn might end up sacrificing itself? Wasn't really expecting it to be on the very next move, but here we are. We are attacking the light square bishop. We're attacking this pawn. Black needs to take. There's 2 ways that Black can take. Black can take with the bishop, or Black can take with the pawn. If Black takes with the bishop, now there's a there was a lot of stuff on the e-file, so I understand why Black wasn't so scared of it, but the amount of stuff on the e-file is rapidly shrinking. Now we can take this bishop. Okay. I guess this is also winning. Computer thinks the outer order is a little more precise, but whatever. Queen takes. Now we take this knight. That is... No, sorry. Now we, do this move first, I guess? Yeah, so if we start with this, there's a pin on the c-file, so Black cannot take. We will grab this rook. And we are threatening to take this knight because of the pin on the e-file. So Black's only move would be to bring the queen back to e7, trying to keep the e-file under control. And then we need to find the knockout. And then... Thank you, Cameron Heidi, for the raid. You've come at an interesting moment. Joe might be about to do something crazy. He's reaching out his hand. Let's go back to the video. E6 on the board. My goat. Well done, Joe. My absolute goat. E6 is on the board, and if Joe has calculated this precisely, and I really put emphasis on the term calculated this precisely because I'm not 100% sure I've calculated it precisely yet. But if Joe's calculated this precisely, Joe is going to win a piece in the game very soon. Very, very soon. What a move. What a sequence by Joe. Knight takes d5, e6. What did this guy eat today? Somebody control this guy. He must be stopped. e6 is on the board. And the reason that this is so strong is the e-file is going to open up. All of these pieces simultaneously are under attack. Count them. 1, 2, 3 pieces, all under attack. And even though we can only take one of them at a time, we are going to take 2 of them. And we've only sacrificed 1, which means we're going to have 1 more piece than the opponent. And that is good. That is the analysis that you've all come here to see. That is good. So Black, let's be concrete. Black has 2 ways to deal with this advance. The sacrifice of a pawn, in addition to the sacrifice of a piece. We have now sacrificed a full piece, and we are throwing another pawn into the fire. There are 2 ways to defend. Black can try to take with the bishop. We're going to go ahead and take... Well, I guess I was saying this one. Doesn't really matter. Either way. We can take this bishop. Now, if Black takes with the bishop, the e-file has now completely cleared out. Remember there were, what, 5 pieces on this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces on the e-file just a second ago. But now, after all of the exchanges, there is nothing left. We slide back with the bishop. Discovered attack. There's no way to defend this. Black would have to come back with the bishop. White takes queen somewhere, some magical place. And then the final nail in the coffin, the very simple b3. Knight has no particularly good square to go to, has to go back to b6. Queen to e5. And this king is going to be completely decimated where it started the game. It is cut off from castling by this very, very powerful bishop. These are the 2 bishops, by the way. Compare the 2 bishops. This bishop is completely winning the game for white. This bishop is like the most useless piece to ever appear in a game of chess. White is just completely crashing through now. There's no way to defend everything. We're entering in so many different ways. White is dominating and will win very, very swiftly. If we take here and Black doesn't take back, if Black tries to slide the bishop back, we have pretty much the same problem. We can trade, play b3. There's a pin on this knight, so it's going to have to come back to defend the rook. And then after a very, very simple move, just like bishop g5, for example, this pawn is not savable. The king is still stuck in the center. So once this pawn falls, Black is going to get mated as well. Another just complete disaster. So going back to this position, Black can try to take with the pawn. And then we have exactly the same problem. We're going to take this knight. Black will take back. Bishop to d2 check. Now at least the king gets a little bit safer than it was. It's not completely stuck on e8 where it began the game. But after a couple of checks, it's going to have to take a very lengthy trip to Narnia. We go ahead and grab this bishop. Material quality is restored, but this king is on g6, and the mating attack is nowhere near stopping. Every piece is going to join the party. h4, h5, rook c3, rook g3. Like there's so many ideas, and once again, this bishop, complete piece of garbage. This bishop, best piece in the world. So either way Black captures, there's going to be a massive mating attack occurring. And there's nothing to do. Like, there's no alternative. You can't leave this pawn here. Black could try to slide this bishop back, but this is giving away not only a piece, it's giving away actually a full rook. Black is pretty screwed. I don't know. I think that's a professional term for it. So now the opponent who has already been shocked by knight takes d5. An insane move, like crazy move to come up with. Not an idea I've ever seen before. We have this insane sacrifice. And immediately, Black falters. With a very natural move, knight f5. I mean, if it didn't lose on the spot, this would be a great move. e6 is now on the board. And the opponent is realizing what he has done. He's going to be looking for a way out. But I think both players realize at this point that this is no longer the result is no longer in question objectively. The only question is whether Joe is going to allow his opponent back into the game. And so for the opponent, in a way that's freeing, he knows that he's no longer in control. He does not control his destiny. His fate is in the hands of his opponent. And he's just going to be praying that his opponent, that Joe, is going to slip up and give him that glimmer of hope that we were talking about in Game 3. We're on the opposite side now. It's a lot more fun to be on this side. What an incredible game. I'm not going to jinx it by calling anything, but it really does need to be said that we're only on move 15, and we've seen 2 moves now that I don't think chess.com is going to give a brilliant, but I personally think they probably both deserve it. Like, this is a Joe legacy game right here, if he brings it home. Yeah, I am pretty surprised by the opponent's response there. Not necessarily the move. Knight f5 is a very natural move. But this is not the moment where you should be playing quickly. Like, you've just been surprised by a move that you almost certainly didn't anticipate. You know the position is going to be very dangerous, and you need to be precise. That is the time in the game where you need to expend your time. Like, that's what it's for. When you're given 90 minutes at the beginning of the game, you kind of, like, expect that most moves you're going to be making in, like, a minute or two, very quickly. And then 2 to 3 times a game, you're going to be, like, really investing a lot of time. And one of the very, very important skills that you need to develop as you get better and better is knowing when to invest your 20, 30 minutes. Like, what point of which position is critical enough that deserves spending that time? And that was very clearly, in my mind, one of those moments where the character of the position has completely shifted. You don't have a plan prepared, or you almost certainly don't have a plan prepared. You're not 100% sure what the evaluation of the position even is. You don't know if you're losing. You don't know if your opponent's, like, completely squandered everything and now it's equal. Like, that is the moment where you need to sit down and give it, like, some very, very serious thought. But Knight f5 was played very, very quickly, which suggests that, like, this move e6, like, didn't even occur to him as a possibility. And now he's in very, very deep trouble for it. Wondering if knight e3 has any hope to it. Like, immediately here? The problem mostly is that, like, there are a few ways that Black can avoid losing material, at least. But he needs to do so in a way that doesn't fall under a mating attack as well. So, for example, like, he could have taken here, sure. And, like, technically speaking, maybe he, like, escapes, like, a little bit. Although in this case, you actually are just kind of picking up the extra piece. But even if you weren't, this king is in, like, total Narnia. Like, even if we just took here, surprisingly, the bar didn't even move. I was going to say the bar's going to drop a little, but it's still very clearly winning. The bar didn't even drop. This might be a slight... Okay, it drops like 0.5. Like, both... this position is so bad for black with the king here that the computer thinks it's, like, almost better to go for this than to take a free full piece. So he has to be... Like, the problem isn't even, like, saving all of his material. He has to do it in a way that doesn't get mated. And that's a very, very tall order. Now, for Joe, what he needs to realize is that he doesn't need to win material here. It's good enough to just get a position that has a very serious attack against the king. Because if he fixates too much on, I should win a piece here, then he can get into a little bit of trouble. And when I say a little bit of trouble, I mean the position becomes only +2 instead of +5. Like, it'll still be winning. But he'll have to be a lot more careful. Joe has to go bishop f5. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, if we go back to the analysis, like, bishop e6 is on the board. White has two obvious options, which is to take either of the hanging pieces. This looks more natural because it's forcing, it's attacking the queen as well. And then saying, okay, once black takes, like, I mean, first of all, we would like to do this idea, but the queen does come back and defend, so we're not doing that. Instead, we're doing bishop d2 immediately. And after queen e7, then Joe needs to find a response. And it turns out, like, the bar is still very happy because the position is just overwhelming. There's probably a lot of moves that White can play here. I'm not sure exactly what, but, I mean, bishop g5 looks like a very natural candidate. The queen can't move because it's needed to block the pin on the e-file, so f6 is forced. And then even just like rook e1 should be good enough to reach a winning endgame. But this would give Joe like a lot more work to do. And then Joe also needs to worry about, okay, what if black doesn't take this pawn? What if black takes the opportunity to slide back to, I don't know, d8 or something and try to, well, okay, I guess it can't be d8, but let's say b6. And just try to give up the pawn for some defensive posture. Like, is this enough? We're not up. I guess it's not even giving up pawn. We're not even up material. But Joe needs to worry about, like, is this good enough? And we know it is, but in game, I don't think I would be super confident. I don't think Joe's super confident either. So Joe needs to decide between that or taking on f5. And the problem that Joe might, like, the only way that Joe goes wrong here is if he doesn't think, like, this is that good for White, which he might not. He might see this position and think, like, okay, I'm probably better, but I don't know if I'm winning for sure. But as we can see by the bar, he is winning for sure, probably with a lot of different options. I mean, bishop g5 already looks... Okay, the bar drops a little bit, but this pawn is dead. White should win very, very comfortably. So the onus now is on Joe to decide. I guess both options lead to a position that he doesn't actually win material, per se, but he is getting a mating attack, and he needs to decide which mating attack is more mating. But this is our current position. Joe is deep in thought. And for Joe, this is a good moment to use his time as well, because this is probably the last time of the game that he'll have to use time. If he calculates correctly here, the game ends. So he knows he doesn't, like, he knows he's allowed to spend even like 20 minutes here, and it's fine, even though he doesn't have... He only has 40 minutes, but he knows that, like, if he spends 15-20 minutes here just crossing his eyes and dotting his T's, that's perfectly acceptable. The worst thing to do would be to, you know, try to conserve time, rush it, and give yourself a very, very difficult conversion with still not a lot of time. But right now, things are looking up. Everything's coming up Joe. It's been a masterpiece of a game so far. Needs to bring it home. The other ruin, I think, for Joe is he can't lose from here. And he knows that. Like, the absolute worst case is he's going to liquidate into, like, some kind of pawn up endgame or something like that. Within the next moves, that would be, like, if everything goes wrong, he ends up in, like, some kind of pawn up endgame or something. So he's going to be very, very comfortable. And in comparison, his opponent's going to be like, oh, man, like, even if I get a miracle, like, I still have a long defense to deal with. Like, do I even want to be here? But yeah, Joe looks like he's chilling. He does not look stressed at all. He knows that this is winning. He just knows that he needs to be precise as well. With these isolated pawns is a dead draw if you liquidate too swiftly. I don't know about dead. White would still be better in most, like, random endgames. But yes, it is very easy. Like, we do need to... This is the moment to do something. We need to be proactive. If we sit around for too long, like, the opportunity can slip very easily. And he did play e6 very quickly, which suggests to me that he knows that he saw at least one position that he thinks is winning when he played e6, and now he's just deciding if there are more winning positions. But I don't think there's any doubt in his mind that there is a winning position he can go for. So I'm not really concerned that he's going to blunder into, like, some kind of draw here. If he, like, spent a lot of time and then, like, very unsure of himself played e6, then I'd be more worried that he's going for something, like, some slightly better endgame or something. But when you play it instantly, like, he saw it was winning. I don't know which way he saw it was winning, but he saw one of these winning mating attacks. Now he's just picking his favorite. He is looking around, like, annoyed, I guess. I mean, the other possibility that could happen, the negative possibility that I hope isn't happening, is that he thought that he was winning the queen here. Sorry. Like, it's possible that he thought that taking this bishop was winning the queen. And he just missed that this queen can come back and defend. And now he's like, oh no, what have I done? I missed this, and now I just gave away a pawn for nothing. Now I need to survive. He could be thinking that. I don't think it's likely, but he could be thinking that, and now he's scrambling to, like, come up with something. Technically possible. But even if that's the case, he's going to be like, okay, well, I'm here now. What's the best I can do? And then he'll see, like, that he has other options as well. I think either way, we're going to end up in a position where Joe is very, very close to winning. And he's just trying to see it to the end in his head right now. But he doesn't look 100% relaxed yet. He knows there's work to do, which is good. Can't relax just yet. Nothing is over in chess until the king falls over. Now he's locking in. The opponent kind of doesn't look like he's that invested in the game now. I think the opponent has kind of acknowledged that he's just a passenger on the ride now. He's just gonna watch, like, this position unfold. He has no decisions to make. Well, every one of his moves from here on out for the next, like, 5 or 6 moves is going to be completely forced. So he has no decisions, which is nice. But he's also dead lost, which is not nice. So he's just like, at this point, like, okay, just like, you know, if you're gonna beat me, just put the dagger in already, you know? Like, don't think for 20 minutes and then, like, show me the precise winning variation. Just get it over with. I don't want to be here. Understandable feeling. Welcome to my life. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if Joe takes another, like, even 15 minutes here. As long as he doesn't drop below, like, 10 minutes. I think going for, like, half an hour here would be a little egregious. But as long as he keeps himself, like, 20 minutes here, I'm pretty okay with investing a lot of time. And he looks like he knows. This is the look of a man who's deciding, not a look of a man who's concerned. Okay, I lied. Now it's the look of a man who's annoyed. Uh-oh. So he sees something he doesn't like. That's not a psychological trick. There's no need to do psychological tricks here, so him shaking his head is like, that's serious. He's unhappy about something. So now I'm getting nervous again. Yeah, that is Joe playing. Joe's got the white pieces here. So far he's put in a masterclass. But it seems like even he underestimates his own strength. He's stressing a little. He missed something in his analysis here, and he's worried. I don't think he's worried he's worse, but I think he's worried that he's not as cleanly winning as he was expecting. And to be fair, it is not like a clear win. Nothing he can do here is gonna like cause their opponent to resign immediately. He is gonna get a position that is winning in like a lot of ways, which is nice. Because most likely what's gonna happen is he's gonna spend some time here looking for a super like concrete win that isn't there. And then he's gonna get low on time and he's gonna settle for something that he thinks is good, but maybe not winning. And then in reality it is winning, but he just thinks that it's like a good position. And then the good news is once we get there, like anything he does will still be winning. And he'll realize that at some point. Like, at some point we'll get there and he'll be like, okay, I mean, this looks good, but I don't know if I can win this. And then he gets to the position, he's like, wait, no, like, everything's winning. Awesome. So I'm not 100% concerned yet, but we are starting to get into a little danger territory. Where it doesn't look like he's thrilled. And if he's not thrilled, like, that's where mistakes can happen. Okay, he's reaching out for the f5 knight. That is the correct move, the most convincing. And it is on the board. Well done, Joe. So far, so good. He's gone ahead and taken the knight. My guess is of what's happening is he saw that bishop f5 here from the opponent. Like, he understands... He understands that this position is completely winning for him, I think. I think this much he understands. And this is what he initially calculated, and he saw this and he stopped calculating. He said, okay, I'm winning. Correct. And then I think what he's worried about, and why he was shaking his head, is he's like, oh wait, they don't have to take, they can move the bishop back. And now he's thinking, like, how winning is this? I'm not 100% sure. Because I'm not a material. The material is equal. Okay, I can go after this pawn, but like... I don't know, maybe he can defend the pawn, maybe he can sacrifice the pawn. Like, it's not the clearest win of all time. So I think he saw this, and that's why he's annoyed. But the good news is that once he gets to this position, which is pretty likely, I think it's very likely that this is the position we see on the board, he's gonna, like, he can't do anything wrong. No move he can play spoils the win, really. Like, he can probably even play like rook e1, and it's still basically winning. It's not even, it doesn't even drop that much. Like, rook e1's a perfectly fine move. Bishop g5, I would guess, is the most convincing. Bar doesn't love, yeah, no, Bar's happy. Yeah, bishop g5 is probably the most convincing. Maybe this is what he saw just now and is what convinced him to just go for this line. But any move is like, I mean, you can play h4, honestly. Like, we can go back to the h4 idea. It's still going to be very, very complete domination. So I think what's likely going to end up happening is we get that position. Black will play bishop e7 here because he understands that this is hopeless. And bishop e7 objectively is even more hopeless, but at least gives white more of a job to do. And then Joe just like plays any move, maybe even a bad move, but it's still winning. That's what happened in the first game today. Got to 10 minutes plus 2 and drew. Yeah, I mean, like, this is a position that you can mess up in time pressure, which is why I'm very happy that Joe made a move. Like, even if he took on b4, which would have lost a lot of his advantage, I would be happy that he's left himself time. 30 minutes is plenty of time to convert this position. 20 minutes, plenty of time to convert this position. 10? We're starting to push it. And the opponent also, by the way, like, I did say that the opponent has no decisions to make. This technically is a decision. He could make Joe's life a lot easier if he's not careful. It's not big decisions, but he does have to worry about, like, what is the least losing thing. Yeah, that's the other nice thing about, like, the position's very straightforward. White also doesn't have a lot of decisions to make. You have to be precise to, like, get here, but once he gets to the position where, like, he's traded down to the equal material, he's just putting pressure on the e6 pawn or whatever, like, every move just kind of flows naturally. There's, like, a slight choice of order that you have to worry about, but the basic principle is very, very clear. From what I saw in the first game today, like, yeah, he was winning, but it wasn't immediately obvious what the, like, general procedure was. Here, the procedure is quite clear. He just needs to be accurate in the execution. Opponent does not look phased in the slightest. But his time is ticking too, which is good. Like, even if we do end up in a worst case scenario and this turns into a time scramble, we're not that far behind on time or anything. Yeah, after Black makes his move here, we're probably going to be basically even time. Oh no, Black moves immediately. Okay. About to reach out. Bishop takes f5, so this is the good version. This makes it a little easier for Joe, but he does need to find bishop d2 here, which is not a hard move, but he needs to. He absolutely needs to find it. If he takes on b4, he's probably not winning. Might not even be better. Might be, like, I might prefer Black. So this is a big moment. Joe has one move, and one move only. Probably. Maybe there's two. But probably one move, and one move only, that maintains the winning position. Will he find it? 30 minutes on the clock. We see a little shake of the head. Not a good sign. But I think, I mean, he sees bishop d2. I think he's shaking his head because he's not sure if it's winning. But he knows he has to play it, so it doesn't really matter. If it's like, maybe it's winning, maybe it's not, you still make the move. And there it is. Good job, Joe. The position remains decisively in white's favor. All that's left is the conversion. I know Joe looks annoyed at himself, but he has played, like, a masterpiece this game. I agree, Senyu. Like, this game could genuinely be in a book. Maybe we'll be in a book someday. Bishop to d2 exclamation mark on the board. Black technically has a choice here as well. Black can decide how it is that he wants to block the check. Both bishop e6 and bishop e4 are legal. Technically, I guess you could even move the king, but then you're like really throwing in the towel. So one of the blocks will occur. I would expect bishop e6 because you're less likely to lose a piece that way. You're very likely to lose a piece with bishop e4, bishop e6 maybe not. Yep, bishop e6 is on the board. Joe is going to go ahead and take on b4 very quickly, with the bishop, of course, not with the pawn. Now the opponent needs to decide where to put the queen. Doesn't really matter where. So he'll probably just pick some random square and move pretty quickly. I think for the opponent, his out at this point is Joe doing something silly in time pressure. So he's probably just going to be moving quickly, regardless of whether it's all that good. Because where he puts the queen is kind of irrelevant. It could go to, I mean, literally like any of these squares are basically all the same. Even queen c7 is probably like the same, even though that hits, like gives a piece. So you probably won't do that one. One big problem for black, for example, just to show one example of why this is so dire, is if black goes queen back to b6 now, which is a very natural square for the queen to go to, you might even play it. We can play b3, attacking the knight. The knight basically has nowhere to go. It has to go back to d6, it's the only square to keep this knight defended. But now once we remove that knight, black can't take back immediately because the rook will be undefended due to the pin. So black first needs to exchange the rooks, but once he does, he runs into exactly the same problem, exploiting the pin on the e-file and collecting the second rook in the corner with a very, very easy conversion. So for that reason, black needs to keep the queen in contact with the rook. It looks like, you know, we see queen d8 is on the board, trying to avoid at least losing the rook immediately. But it's going to give only minor relief. Now, Joe should do pretty much the same thing. We should start with b3, get rid of this very powerful knight, get the queen into the game, start bringing both rooks into the game. Knight g5 is coming, putting pressure on this bishop. And I expect b3. I mean, there's no other move that makes any sense, so I don't think Joe will miss this opportunity. The only thing that he's calculating is whether after b3, he knows if the knight goes back, then like this is a huge success for him, and then he'll do it. The only thing he has to calculate is this counter thrust a5, trying to contest the bishop. The nice thing for him is that tactically, he's actually picking up a full piece here for very similar reasons to what we just saw, where after the exchange of pieces, it looks like black has escaped the worst, because now black can castle, this very powerful bishop has been liquidated, but after takes, black can't take immediately because of the same pin that we just talked about, and if he exchanges the rooks first, exactly the same problem, black will lose the full rook. So this a5 move is not possible, means this knight has to move, and if this knight has to move, then maybe Joe's still not sure if he's winning, but he knows that this inclusion has to help him. So I think b3 is basically automatic. And we should see it pretty quickly, I would imagine. A kind of good thing for Joe here is that there is no other way to preserve this bishop. If he plays any other move, then a5 will happen. So he's kind of forced to play b3, which on the one hand is like obviously you'd think it's bad because that means Joe has to find an only move, and in a way that is bad. But at the same time, because it's an only move, it makes it like pretty easy to find. If he had an alternative that preserves his bishop, then it would be a much tougher decision. So I have faith in Joe here. I think we will see b3 on the board. Within the next, 60 seconds even, I think we'll see b3 on the board. And if he does that, then I think, again, I'm not calling anything to not jinx it, but I think it's very, very likely that the opponent collapses within, 5 moves. It's hard to defend. I mean, it's impossible. It's literally impossible to defend, but practically it's also hard to even, keep the game going. If he doesn't play b3, then it's less clear. I would still think white is much, much, much better if he doesn't play b3, but I'd be less confident that he's going to convert it. I would actually think it's probably unlikely that he converts it if he doesn't find b3. So this is still a pretty big moment. Come on, Joe. Let's get it. Yes. Well done, Joe. b3 on the board. And you can see the opponent's reaction. We're gonna jump back 5 seconds. Look at the opponent's reaction when he sees b3. I'm gonna jump back 10 seconds. Movie magic. b3 on the board. Look at the opponent's reaction. He is not happy to see that move. Understandably. That could very well be the nail in the coffin. Knight to b6 is on the board. Only move. And now Joe has his pick of the litter. Every move is good. We don't even have to sweat anymore for at least another move or two. Joe could play anything here. Anything reasonable. I mean, okay, I would suggest he doesn't move his queen here. But any reasonable move probably preserves the win. So at least for 2 or 3 moves, we get to chill. Zero stress watching this game. No matter what Joe does here, he will still be winning. It's just a question of how easy it's going to be. The most natural move is queen e5, and I think that is what will end up being played. If white goes ahead and just brings the queen into the position. We talked about this earlier, but just to show it again. We are threatening this pawn. That's the immediate direct threat. Black would love to castle and defend it, but not allowed to move from check. This bishop keeps everything under control. So the only real way to defend it is this pretty ugly move, queen to f6. Now, you might be tempted as white to say, okay, I'm going to break open your pawn structure and exchange the queens, but that would be a very serious mistake. White would still be much better here, but nowhere near winning. The real benefit that white has here is that black's king is very, very unsafe, and so we want to keep the queens on to maintain that advantage. So after queen f6, we're going to move the queen away. Multiple squares look fine to me. I think d6 is probably the most natural, but it does run into queen d8, and then we probably do this dance again. So coming back to g3 is probably the most normal. And now black is completely frozen. Black has really, like, just zero useful moves. So probably we're going to end up taking and bringing the other rook to c1, just infiltrating on the queen side and dominating everything. For example, black might try h5, trying to put pressure on this queen and activate the rook along from the side. And the easiest is probably just takes, maybe rook c1 is the easiest. Apparently there's more precise ways, but rook c1 would be my immediate instinct. And then slowly, like, these pieces are all coming into the queen side, everything is collapsing. We should pick up at least a couple of pawns and have very, very good chances to convert very quickly. So that's one option that Joe can go for with queen e5. Another is just start bringing more pieces into the game. We can just play, for example, rook e1. Very, very simple move, starting to put more pressure down the e-file, not allowing black to do anything in the meantime. Again, black can't castle, so this pickle that he finds himself in is permanent. After queen e5, queen f6, is queen b8 really bad? You mean with the exchange, probably? So if we trade rooks and then queen b8, that's, like, fine, too. The only thing that I want to be very careful about is that at some moment, black is going to sacrifice the pawn with a5 and try to castle out of it. Just to, like, we're giving away 2 pawns, in fact, just to get the pieces active, and then argue that the opposite color bishops give black good holding chances. That's probably black's main defensive plan, and so queen b8, yes, like, we will pick up those 2 pawns, but those are 2 pawns that we would pick up under any circumstances. So I'm a little hesitant about going for it early, but it is one of many winning plans here, yes. I mean, if that is what Joe goes for, the odds that he wins are still very, very high. I think the most professional thing Joe could do, actually, I don't think he'll do this, but the most professional, like, really just nail in the coffin thing he can do here is play the move a4, which looks like a really weird move, but the point is just that now whenever black plays a5 and tries to sacrifice the pawn to castle, we can slide our bishop back and maintain this bind that we have black tied up in forever. What's up, Chess with Jordan? Joe is currently -1. He's 1.5 out of 4. This is round 5. So if he wins this game, he will be back to an even score. And right now it's looking really good. He's played, like, beautiful game so far. Just has to bring it home. But we are getting into time pressure now. This is a very... not an easy conversion either. So there's a long way to go for the full point, but so far he has done everything right. Put it back on the big screen. Get him, Joe. The thing is, I don't even know what move I'm rooting for. I'd be kind of okay with, like, most moves. As long as it's not ridiculous. And I can't even think of, like, a ridiculous move that you would ever consider, honestly. So I'm not going to be upset at really whatever he chooses. But if he plays a4, I'll be very impressed. I guess I'm sort of rooting for a4. That would be a really, really high-level idea. He's thinking, though. Looks like he's reaching for the queen. hesitating. It's not 100% sure yet, but it looks like he wanted to play queen e5, which I'd be pretty happy with. Now he's rethinking whatever it was he was going to do. But he was definitely reaching for the queen. I don't know where he wants to put it. d5 is the one that makes by far the most sense. But he could slide it to e3 also is like not that crazy, I guess. After a4, yeah, I mean that is one idea. Black might have to start going to these kinds of contortions to try to castle, but it's just too slow. And I guess Rook c7 also has the concrete problem of now this is a fork even, so Black is losing material. But even if that wasn't the case, even if we just played something like Bishop a3 just sliding back, then Knight c8 takes, bring the other rook in. It's just not going to be fast enough because we're going to be able to put pressure on this bishop. And everything just falls apart too quickly. It's a good idea, and it's what Black is probably going to have to aim for. But there's just too many ways for White to put it away in that case. Yeah, I do like a4 a lot, just because it really removes all doubt. The only thing Black can try is playing a5 and sacrificing to get the king castled. And that's not, like, it's not like that's something we have to prevent. Joe might not feel the need to, like, I'm sure Joe sees that that's an idea, but he might not feel the need to prevent it because he accurately thinks, okay, fine, like, congratulations, you got castled, but I'm going to be up 2 pawns and just completely winning. But it's probably going to be a little easier for him if he doesn't even entertain that idea at all and just plays a4, eliminates any possibility of Black castling ever, and just plays for the initiative instead. But queen e5 is on the board. Joe going for the most concrete option, trying to end the game cleanly without any funny business. Yeah, that's the other way Black can try to activate the pieces. Try to go for h5, h4, rook h6. Try to activate the rook that way. But it's also a very slow plan. In the meantime, White is taking so many things. But in this case, it's all moot, because those would both be, like, both yours and Zoomjin's ideas are what Black would probably have to go for if White just slowly improves the position. But White is being very forcing here. We are just attacking this pawn. That means queen f6 is completely forced. There is no other legal move. I guess technically rook g8, but it's not really legal. So, I mean, we should see queen f6 quite quickly. I don't think there's any other option you can go for. Yeah, they do have all the streamers in the same area. Real strategy. So Tony is behind him, or on the same table as him. There's a couple others at the tables to left and right. Which is nice. They get their little dedicated board. They get to be behind a little bit like sectioned off from the main. The big main room, so there's a little less foot traffic and everything. Fewer distractions. I am pretty surprised the opponent is thinking here, because this is a move that the opponent should have anticipated, and also his whole strategy at this point has to depend on Joe running out of time. So when you only have one legal move available, you should just play it very quickly. maybe Joe is going to show you like some very concrete idea and you lose, but like you were losing anyway, so you don't lose anything if that happens. You have to play to the out of, okay, like I survived this game if my opponent gets really, really low on time and then makes a mistake. So I have to assume that that's the world that we live in. Otherwise, nothing matters. And if that's the world that we live in, I need to just like make my move. Does the opponent have to agree to that setup? Technically, no. Because by entering the tournament, you're kind of implicitly agreeing to it. But in practice, if there's a player that like doesn't want to be on camera, most streamers will respect that and either have the camera off or tilt the camera so that their opponent is invisible, only they are. There are some streamers that don't care and will just do it anyway. But most of them will respect like the privacy of the opponent, especially when it's a child. Which this opponent I think technically is. I think we are playing a like 16, 17-year-old. But I also don't. I mean, it's also less and less common to ask directly now. Like it used to be when streaming over the board events was first a thing. The first couple streamers that would do it would like ask their opponents before the game, like, "Are you okay if I stream this?" Nowadays, it's just kind of assumed that you are okay with it, and if they're not, then like you expect that they'll complain. And then there are streamers who will like get set up and then intentionally show up a little late to the game so the game's already started and your opponent can't say that they're uncomfortable with it. Okay, Queen f6 is on the board. But it's pretty uncommon that people are not comfortable with it. I think at this level, like, I mean, it gets a little fuzzier at the lower levels, like, because these are people who are not used to being on camera and not used to having their games followed. But especially at the high, like in the open sections of this tournament, like for people who are 2,000, 2,200, 2,400 title players, like, it's not a foreign concept to them to be watched. Maybe not live on camera, but they know their games are being looked at. So it's like kind of whatever. And a lot of them are like have done some form of streaming themselves or some kind of content, like they understand the process. But there are like when people stream in the under sections, like, and sometimes very low sections, because there are a number of beginner amateur players that have streamed this event. I don't know if there are this year, but in general, there usually are like players around like 11, 1200. And they play very, very young opponents as a result. Like, it's not uncommon to play against like a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old. Then it's a little more common for people to be uncomfortable with it because they're not used to being like pseudo public figures and they don't want to be like they don't want to beat the streamer and then like have like hundreds of angry fans like swarming them. Which is it is a thing that happens like occasionally in some of the bigger chats. They don't want to be like villain number one, you know. But once you get to like the level that Joe's at, I think people are generally pretty understanding of the setup. I wonder if there's a world. Yeah, I mean, black can go for counterplay that way, but moving the bishop will always leave the e-file open. Things get very, very dangerous. No one cares unless you dox them. Well, I mean, the names are public. That much nobody can reasonably complain that their name is being like broadcast. Because like all pairings are public, all ratings are public. Like no like private information is being released. Yeah, exactly. Because like nowadays tournaments that support this kind of thing. Like Vegas is one. There's a number of European tournaments, but generally tournaments that support this kind of thing will explicitly say like by signing up for this tournament you're consenting to be recorded, blah 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 blah, that sort of thing. And the most people obviously won't be going to streamer boards, so it won't apply to them, but the ones that are, like, technically they've already agreed to it. In the meantime, we see Joe did go for the exchange of rooks, which suggests that he's about to play the move queen to b8 and go ahead and grab these queenside pawns, which is going to give him a huge advantage heading into the endgame, but not a guaranteed win. This is not the cleanest conversion by far. So Joe is still winning, but his life is going to be a little bit harder now. Assuming, of course, that the opponent does play a5 and is willing to jettison all the pawns to get himself castled. Which he should be. It's his only idea, but he might panic, try to hold the material, and fall apart even quicker. Queen b8, b3, what's next? b6, I assume you mean? We can go to the analysis. So Joe is probably going to put his queen on b8 here. He might go to c7, but he's probably going to move his queen here, attacking this pawn. And now, if black tries to hold all of the pawns together, what black should do is black should sacrifice this pawn to divert the bishop away and get his king castled. And now after takes, black's pieces are at least activating. Black is much worse because he's down 2 pawns. He's objectively losing, but he has hope now. If black gets greedy and tries to hold all of his pawns together, then after a really simple move like just rook e1, the pin on the bishop means that white is threatening this knight, and there's no way to defend it. The only way to defend it is to bring this queen all the way back, and then white can just bring his queen back as well. This pawn once again becomes indefensible, and now queen f6 is no longer possible because, among other things, we can just take this pawn, exploiting this pin. So black basically doesn't have time to afford, or cannot afford the time wasting a move on b6 because it will allow this rook to get into the game, is the basic concept. And that's going to apply like in most of these positions. Like whatever it is that white plays, the follow-up is probably going to be rook e1, and then black is just totally like black is basically playing down a full rook with his king stuck in the center. So something is gonna collapse. Thank you, Matt Hennington. Henningsen for the raid. Sorry, I've been notoriously bad at pronouncing names, mostly because I had to figure out how to pronounce I'm not gonna try. Joshang? Something like Joshing? So I did slightly better with yours, even though it was really bad. But thank you for the raid. Welcome in. We are watching Joe hopefully put the finishing touches on what has been an absolute masterpiece of a game. Sacrifice of a piece, sacrifice of one. Seen it all. Joe's played a beautiful, beautiful game, and he's followed it up here with queen to c7, which I think is actually even more accurate than queen b8. Because now with a5, the bishop is not actually deflected, we can actually take with the queen. And if black plays b6, then we have exactly the same problems that we were just talking about with the pin on the e-file. So Joe, I think queen c7 is a very, very powerful move, and this might be the nail in the coffin for Joe's opponent here. Yeah, I agree, Jordan. I think it's good that over-the-board events get more of this type of exposure. It's not content that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in, which is why it's always going to have limited appeal. But I think it's really good that it exists because it does put a spotlight on, especially, like, first of all, players that you normally wouldn't have heard of or follow. It does, you know, put over-the-board chess, like, it keeps it kind of relevant in this age where a lot of chess, I mean, all chess content obviously is online, mostly fast chess. There's a lot of positives. I generally enjoy when people are streaming their own games like this, and I try to watch usually. Happy to be a part of it this time, because I love yapping aimlessly into the void. My favorite. Zhou Cheng. I know I'm close-ish, but I don't know what the exact pronunciation is. Okay, so the opponent does go for b6. So he is very greedy. He's trying to hold everything together. You can see Joe gets to, like, really? Like... Okay, I guess I play any move and win. So the cleanest is going to be Rookie 1 here, and then... Yeah, Joe's trying to understand why there's any ambiguity. He's just going to play Rookie 1 and end the game, I think. And if we go to the big board, we can see exactly why. What Joe is about to do here, after Queen c7, is he's going to just slide his rook over. It's now on the board. Joe has actually played it. And now, once again, this knight is under attack. It's trapped, actually. It can't go anywhere. So the only way to defend it is to try to slide this queen back. But now, Joe can give the absolute final dagger. No ambiguity, nothing to speak of anymore. Sacrifice the rook. It had to be said. We knew it was going to happen. Black is forced to take. And now after picking up this pawn, the rook will be recovered in the corner. There's no defense to it. White will emerge up a piece and still with a mating attack, so it's not even like Black can play on down a piece even if he wanted to. And this will be instant resignation. In fact, I expect that is probably how this game is going to end. Let's go back to the video, because this game might be over in like 2 minutes. Queen to d8 on the board. And this is it. This is going to be the moment. Let's see it, Joe. Will Joe be willing to sacrifice the rook to end this game? Beautiful game. Like, I don't know how many other ways to say it. This was perfect from, like, start to finish. Okay, there were like some minor inaccuracies in the early middle game, but since then it's all been perfect. Here we go. Just slides the rook down the board. The bishop is off. The opponent knows it's over. Joe knows it's over. The capstone of a tremendous game. Double exclam. The first double exclam of the game. I don't know why this one gets the double exclam while none of the others did. But there you have it. Chess.com certified. Brilliant move by Joe to put this game in the bag, go back to an even score, and we should see a handshake any second now. Maximum 30 seconds. Yep, the opponent's starting to realize. I mean, I'm sure the opponent knew. This is the sort of thing that, like, you can tell the opponent missed this move, but not because, like, they miscalculated. They missed this move because it didn't matter. They just weren't looking at the position. They just kept making the forced move, and then the opponent finally plays Rook e6, and they're like, yeah, okay, knew something like that was coming. Now he's just accepting his fate. There's no calculation anymore. I mean, he has one legal move, and after he plays it, he'll resign. So this is he's doing his little, like, this is the chess thing where you stop thinking because you know you've lost, and you're just doing a little, like, funeral for yourself. You're just kind of coming to terms with what has happened. You got two... Okay, sure. He has 3 legal moves, literally. But he has 1 legal move that you would ever consider, like, putting on the board. Like, yes, Queen e7, technically a legal move. If this guy reaches out and plays Queen e7, we might need to do a little brain scan. Alright, he does let Joe play it out. The rook is taken. Joe is going to slide his queen over, take this pawn, trap the rook. And I guess technically the opponent could play on if he really is bored. But most likely we see a handshake right here. In 3, 2, 1. 1. 1. 1. And 1. 1 and 1 and 1. Okay, I guess the opponent's gonna ruin this moment and be a little bit involved for a bit. Hello, Joe. How is it going? All right, let's wrap this up and then we'll get Joe in here. I'm going to assume this is the final move of the game, at least. I don't think the opponent might think a little bit more, but I don't think he's going to make another move. Because there's no move that you can make here that is worth the energy of reaching your arm out for. I think that must be it, Zoom. He's messing with me specifically. I don't know. I mean, what do we got? What do we think? Is he going to resign or is he going to play 97 for some reason? No, that is true. Technically, all three of the moves were exactly the same evaluation, which is resign in 1. But I feel for the opponent because he's probably just obviously he's not calculating anything here. He knows he's lost, but he's probably just shell shocked because he's like, "What happens this game? Like, how did I lose? I don't think I did anything wrong." A5 on the board for some reason. Now Joe could be really sadistic if he wants to. Joe could be really, really sadistic and move the knight forward. Threaten checkmate, keep the rook trapped. Maybe that's the cleanest win. It's like the fastest time to resignation. Joe could also take the rook and be up a piece and a pawn. Nope, Joe goes for the style points. Knight e5 on the board. And now, surely, that is the last move of the game. Or the opponent takes and lets him checkmate. But the game is not lasting more than one move. Surely. The other funny thing here is, like, even if the opponent, like, wants to be annoying and plays, like, I don't know, queen f6 or something, says, haha, you're not going to mate me, it's still mate. 95. Okay, sure. Knight to d6. Technically, not mate. But it is on the board. The rook is taken. The king has to go forward. And then, among other things, there's picking up the queen. King e7 on the board. Now, which way to convert will Joe choose? There's so many. He's deciding. I think my personal favorite would be... I think I'll take here. Because he would give them the, like, glimmer of hope for a second, and then they'd realize, no, still no hope. But no, Joe's efficient. Goes for knight c6. The opponent nods. And in 3, 2, 1... 1... Joe, don't tell me there's another move in this game. King d7 on the board. We fight on! I better be getting paid overtime for this. Queen is off the board. The knight is taken. Joe will take the second knight. Is this considerable BM in chess etiquette? It's like, it's whatever. It's a little BM, but I mean, it's not really worth being mad about. It's not like refusing a handshake. King b5. Alright. Show me bishop c5, Joe. Let's see it. The most efficient, probably. We go bishop here, take with the pawn, and there's no defense to checkmate. The only way to win this position. Joe has an only move here. For our respect. I guess a4 and queen b8 is just as fast, but like, you know, mine's funnier. So, you have to do that one. King b5 on the board. Hey, technically I am paid hourly, Joe. I'm paid the same amount every hour. Okay, Joe goes for a4, which is also mate in 3, but the less cool mate in 3. Okay, guys, quick. We have to take bets. After king a6, queen b8, does black resign? Does black finally say, oh man, it's mate in 1, like he got me? Or does black allow the mate? I'm gonna guess he resigns. They always resign when it's mate in 1. So queen b8 is mate in 2. Okay, queen b8 on the board. And now we're going to see a resignation in 3, 2, 1. h6! Just as I predicted. And checkmate on the board. There's the hand. Joe takes the victory. Beautiful game. Nearly perfect from start to finish. One blemish at the end with the less cool mate in 3. But other than that, pretty much flawless. No notes. Absolute cinema. Let's get the man in here. Are you you free, Joe? This I gotta hear. 7 rounds, Jordan, for the lower sections. And there we are, the conclusion. All right, let's see if Joe's available. Hello. Give me a second. There he is. Everybody wave hi.
Hi.
Nice game. That was something. I
had to redeem myself after your last game you watched.
This is a redemption and a half. You're ahead now.
Yeah. No, when he played Queen A5, I was up a lot of time and then I gave it all back. I was thinking for a very long time. I didn't particularly like. I saw knight d5 like almost instantly, but for whatever reason, like I wasn't the biggest fan of it because I thought he would like sack on a3 or something after I would play a3. Um, and I thought he would like get another pawn, or I thought I'd have like an isolated b pawn that was going to be annoying, or I thought even he could like move his bishop back and I'd have to take it awkwardly, like on d6 or something. So I was just spending all my time looking for anything besides knight takes d5 because I really didn't want to play it, but I couldn't think of anything better because queen a5 has, I think, some pretty solid threats. He's trying to like win some pawn or something. But I was like, there's no way he could be playing over here and he hasn't castled. So I thought that was kind of ridiculous. Also, I love that he like never castled because I guess there was like Greek gift ideas. Um, so yeah, I sacked on d5 and then I played a3 and then like none of the moves I was expecting happened. Like I was thinking maybe they stack on a3 or maybe they bring the bishop back somewhere where I'd have to take it. And instead he plays like yeah, knight f5 and I was like instantly that's got to be a bad move. Because just e6 was like my favorite move of the game. Just like I don't even have to calculate it that deeply. I just know it's just completely crushing. Um, it's like the most forcing move in the position. It opens up the E file. I have tactics for days. It's such a treat to be able to play a move like that, like that they allow that to happen. Um, so yeah, after that, it felt really smooth. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I feel like I definitely missed some things because towards the end, I thought like after I traded rooks with check, knight takes queen c7, I thought they had this a5 move because I missed queen takes a5. So that's what I pointed out to him after the game. I was like, oh, like once he played b6, I was actually pretty upset because I was like, this move is terrible. Like he could have played a5. But he pointed out to me I could just take with the queen, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. So I guess it didn't really matter too much. Um, but yeah, I just knew b6 and the game's over. But essentially, I was worried about a5 because I only saw bishop takes a5, and then I thought he would castle. So I was like, wait, I actually have to like play the game out again. But even after castling, it's still very good for white.
Right.
Anyways, yeah, rook takes on e6 was nice, and yeah, it was a fun game. So I'm glad that you got to watch it.
Yeah, no, this was an awesome game. I mean, basically every move was perfect. Knight d5, like I'm sure at some point you're gonna watch this back. I'm gonna be yapping for 20 minutes about this position, and at no point did knight d5 like even remotely occur to me. Then you play it on the board. I'm like, what? Like, is that's a legal move? That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I was looking at the computer just now. Apparently, it's like the third best move, but I couldn't see anything else. Like, and also, what was funny about that moment was both the players at the board next to me, like both like looked at my game and they were like, "What the hell is going on?" So
That's a shocking
that was
move,
really
yeah.
fun. Well, I was like, "Okay, queen a5 is bishop's trapped." I mean, I was thinking of moving my knight back like anywhere because his bishop's just trapped.
Right.
And so I couldn't find a good place to put the knight besides taking on d5. I was like, this is the only square. And he could take like 3 different ways or whatever, but they all like 2 of them lose the knight back immediately. So I'm just up a pawn. And then the only like legit way was pawn takes, and then that's what he played. And then I just knew like a3, I'm getting material back. I didn't love it, like because I thought he would maybe getting some pawn back, or like maybe my structure would be bad or whatever. Um, but yeah, it really worked out. His main blunder was knight f5. Knight f5, I think,
For sure. Yeah.
really cost him the game. he overlooked e6 clearly, and I think getting the bishop back to d2 to take on b4 was also really nice. When I played like after he takes e6, and like that's a big moment for me to decide if I want to take on b4 first or if I want to take on f5 immediately. Because I thought, okay, if I take on f5, like maybe he drops his bishop back, his dark square bishop.
Mhm.
But then I just like wanted to take on e6, and I still have like bishop d2 with the tempo, and maybe his knight gets pinned on the c file or something. And maybe I'm crashing through on e6 with the queen with check. Like his king is never castling. So I love that position. It's just so fun because you have all the tactics to play for, and you know the king's stuck in the middle. I sack a piece, I sack a rook later. It's like, yeah, it's a very fun game to get to play. So I'm just grateful that it worked out.
Yeah, no, you almost got the full set. You got the second piece, you got the second rook, you got the second pawn. Like you got to get a queen sack in there. Like one more at the end. Just skip the queen for no reason. You know, get every piece.
Gotta collect them all. But yeah, I don't know if you looked at my game earlier today.
I saw a bit. I was told by the chat that it was a bit of a tragedy.
Yeah, I was like still stuck on that for a little bit at the start of this game, and I was like, I just have to move on and just play. So, but yeah, I'm like thinking, 1.5 is not bad for today. So I'm even now at 2.5 out of 5. So hopefully tomorrow we can end on a positive score. So I got to go 1.5 out of 2 again or better. So I guess that's the goal. Um, but yeah, it's always tricky. Um, and yeah, looking forward to ending strong, building off of this momentum. So we'll see. I think the opponents will be a bit tougher tomorrow, though. So we'll see.
Well, this is a lot of momentum. I mean, this is I'm being told by the chat this was basically a perfect game, which is more or less what it looked like during it. So just do 2 more of those, and like, what's the problem?
Easy. Thank you. Hey, I'll try my best.
Beautiful game. I'm also told that this has to be in a book someday, so you know, one of us needs to write a book.
Okay. Well, I can barely read books, so writing them will be pretty hard.
That was my essay. Yeah, I don't know if I can read it. But I can write it just fine. You know.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm really happy with this game. I can't really ask for much more. I mean, besides missing queen takes a5, like luckily my opponent saw that and didn't play it. Because if he had played a5, like there's a really good chance I would have taken with the bishop.
Right. So well, it's funny because in this position, I thought you were deciding between queen b8 and queen c7, and chose queen c7 specifically so you could take on a5 with the queen.
Yeah, that's really funny. I played c7, just trying to like put the rook on the e file. Like actually, that's probably what I was planning. Instead of taking with the bishop on a5, I was planning on just ignoring a5 and just playing rook e1. And or actually a5. I think my first thought was bishop to c5 first, and then b6. And then I was thinking about there's like queen c6 or there's rook e1. Like, yeah, I think I would have done queen c6 actually. And so he still wouldn't have been able to castle.
Right.
But I just missed queen takes a5. That would have been simple. So maybe if he had played it, I would have thought about it a little bit more and saw it.
Probably.
But yeah, no, really happy with. I'm really happy. Yeah, this is a good game. Solid.
Yeah, for sure. I have one question for you.
What's up?
Back when you were taking on f5, or after you played e6 and he took with the bishop, there was a moment where on camera you're like visibly annoyed. You're like shaking your head. You're like, you look like you missed something. Was there something you missed, or what was going on?
No, I was just like deciding between a takes b4 or bishop takes f5. And I was like, I don't know.
Okay.
I was like, if I take on f5, probably he brings his bishop back. And if I take on b4, like he has to move his queen back somewhere. And I was like, there's a lot of squares his queen could go back. So it felt like a lot to calculate. And I was really just going back and forth. Like my first initial thought was I take on f5.
Mhm.
But then I was like, oh, but then maybe his dark square bishop comes back, right? And so I was like, maybe I just take the bishop first with tempo on the queen, and then take on f5. And then I was looking for like some like bishop discovery checks, and I was like, I don't know. It depends like where his queen will go, or if he saves a bit. Like I wasn't sure, so I think that might have been my moment of like a little bit of frustration.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, at the end I was like, okay, my initial thought was take on f5. Like I just kind of trusted my gut instinct, and the more I looked at it, like I was like, okay, if he tries to save his dark square bishop, I'm taking on e6 again, and then I have this bishop d2 with tempo, and like e6 is going to be super weak and vulnerable, and the c file looked really good for me as well. Because even if he defends his e pawn with his queen somehow, I just knew that like I always had b3 in my pocket,
Mhm.
and he would have to bring the knight back to try to defend the rook, but that would cut off the queen's defense. Like if he goes queen a6 or something, then I know that I just play b3, and then I have queen takes e6 with check, or maybe not with check. Like if he goes bishop e7 or whatever, but I still thought
Right.
that that was going to be crushing for me. Um, but I just stuck with my gut instinct. I was like, let's stick with the first line. Bishop takes f5 first, and like see like if he tries to take or if he brings his dark square bishop back, because I felt pretty good in all of those variations. So he ended up taking on f5, which I was pretty happy with because I get the bishop d2 discovery check, and then he's just never castling. Like my bishop on b4 is just like the best piece on the board.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, it's good. Good intuition then. Good instinct.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks again. You're really appreciated.
Yeah. Of
And
course. Thanks for having me.
Gelato saying straight to the casino now. Probably I'm gonna get dinner, and I have to decide if I want to play in the Blitz or not. Blitz starts at 9 p.m.
Oh, is
It's
that
currently
tonight?
7 p.m. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to eat a quick dinner. Maybe it depends on what my friends are doing. So I'll go try to find some people and see if we want to do dinner and or Blitz. Could do both if we're fast.
Sounds good.
But
I was gonna say
yeah,
get some rest, but if you're playing Blitz, good luck getting some rest.
yeah, dude. It'll be a tough decision for sure. But probably I'm weighing more towards the Blitz. I would prefer Blitz over sleep for sure, I think.
It's fun. I mean, yeah,
But
you're there already. How many chances to play Blitz officially do you get?
exactly.
You know, I'm gonna be the
Never
devil
know
on your
chance,
shoulder
right? You
here.
see. So tomorrow we have Eskia with the morning round and Uncle Jesse closing things out with the evening round. So looking forward to that. Thanks again, Alex. Really appreciate it. You're the best. And I guess we're gonna send everyone off on a raid.
Yep, let's do it. It was an honor. Thank you for having me. Good luck in the rest of the event. I'll be
Thank
watching
you.
closely, so I expect even better games than this.
Okay, it's gonna be tough maybe to top that, but I'll try my best. All right, I'm gonna raid Blenderman.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks everyone. Bye.